Welcome to another human read audiobook by the United Marxist Pact Discord server. Link below in the description. In this series, we continue our investigation into the initial construction, the organizational structure, and the principles and tactics of the form of worker organization, capable of seizing political power and establishing the revolutionary proletarian dictatorship and communality, which can in turn produce the communist mode of production to the shared class interests of the workers of the entire world. Our goal is to compile, analyze, and elaborate on what all these texts have to say about this, and at the end have a strong understanding of the exact scientific process of this, particularly in general terms. At the end of our readings as a whole, we will try to put it all together and present it as a coherent whole, an educational video with associated notations. Today's reading will be the 1926 Third Communist International's Sixth Enlarged Executive Report by the Left of the Communist Party in Italy. We have a pre-written textual analysis on the terms of the aforementioned topics, which is also posted in the pinned comment if you prefer to read it in text, or follow the link in the description to a read-only version of my Google Docs notes. This will summarize the contents of the text, but is no replacement for the actual reading itself for the sake of understanding the context. In addition, in the reading, I supply my own commentary, critiques, additions, etc., which may be helpful for understanding some particularities. So, beginning the analysis. In this text, in terms of all the things previously mentioned, the left of the Communist Party of Italy explains the need to maintain adherence to principles even in objective conditions being contrary to the ability of the party to develop subjective conditions. It offers tactics and to maintain coherence and how to deal with factions and internal party issues. The role of the party in the revolution is to act as the general staff of the proletariat, and that involves a deep study of tactics, whereby we must know the enemy through studying their offensive, ourselves through determination of the concentration of the proletariat along with its exact knowledge of phenomena in terms of its participation and factor in material events and its will and action. From this, we can determine what tactics to follow, and these require a program to carry them out. Because the offensive and concentration are different in each circumstance, different tactics are required to suit the conditions. In developed bourgeois states, for instance, they have high ideological mobilization, capacity for armed struggle, and stemming from those, a well-oiled defeatist education of the working class. While the organizational form is paramount in being able to carry out tactics, it is not the sole determining factor of the success of the revolution. In the phrase, quote, "Problem is a force, not form," end quote. The form of a blade can more easily slay, but without force behind the edge, it will not pierce defenses. The harder the defenses, the better formed the weapon for the job must be, and the greater the force. Ultimately, what is needed is dynamism, allowing rapid form shifting and application to different conditions capable of carrying out necessary work. At all times, the work must include the ability for the working class to discuss general political problems that concern the whole working class, including principally the problems of revolutionary development, the state, and seizure of power. Bordiga's position on organizational forms is that the structure is a political problem of activity and tactics. It does not alone solve all problems. And it's through action and tactics that revolutionary direction is decided. Hence, organizational structure is part of tactics and decides activities. It is therefore one tool of many that determines if a party is revolutionary. We can say things about it prior to carrying it out through analysis of conditions and basis for carrying out work. All organizations must be able to 1. Protect from police, 2. Organize in places without surveillance regularly, 3. Focus on antagonism between capital and labor with the conditions of the meeting ideally creating it, 4. Reject calls for concessions from the state, etc. 5. Lead autonomous action by the proletarian party. In order to protect the party from losing its principles and thereby aims in periods wherein objective conditions are not in place, the party must focus on not falling into workerism or laborism. Understand that the party is not harmed by the active participation of other social classes, as long as they take part in their work, accept party doctrine, and are willing to fight for proletarian class interests. It should resist internal shifts caused by external conditions, which cause ideological discipline to suffer, resisting opportunism even if conditions incentivize it, and in the event of internal crisis, refuse to change principles, but rather investigate the political line and activity for a solution. Good activity, working methods, and inspirational quality will produce leaders. Anti opportunism will produce good leaders in the formation of a general staff. It should not water down its message, which leaves it vulnerable to being co opted by pay bourgeois and social democrat opposition. It should maintain independence while keeping relations with other worker organizations, and defend against any liquidationist tendencies which weaken position. The party must not only have a tie with the masses, but also have a center for those masses to rally around, which can lead them to the final revolutionary objective, acting as a general staff. In terms of how to best handle factions with internal unity, suppression of differences of opinion, the end of factions, and means that the party is on the best path. However, how these are suppressed determines if they truly are or not. 1. It should aim to be homogeneous without differences of opinions or different groupings. This requires that all ideological, tactical, and organizational questions be correctly posed and resolved. 2. It should gather and unite whatever actions and initiatives there are in the class struggle as a whole currently, whatever those may be. 3. When the party fails to stop factions and groups from arising, it is not the fault of individuals, but of the party, and solutions to such deviations cannot be penal but systematic. Attacks on individuals do not resolve anything. 4. Continuous criticism and self criticism harms party unity and cohesion. While statutes need sanctions for breaching, it should only be in exceptional cases and normal. General procedures of the party must be without censure. Everyone must be able to form an opinion and express it frankly, and any and all questions directed at party members should have their political contents made clear. No gotcha questions to test loyalty and the like. 5. Within the party, agitation, which is the mass informing of simple ideas with rote agitation, being able to set the masses in motion with initiative and consciousness being secondary for engaging in this, is harmful, as is propaganda, which focuses on particular sections of the population to educate complex ideas. The class party must be aimed at having complete and general knowledge. 6. Factions need to be analyzed for their reasons of development and aim. The understanding that not all factions are bourgeois. They are symptoms of ideological and political errors. We should aim principally to deal with the causal factors. 7. The party ideally does not have factions, and it must introduce the working class to a new form of politics which is completely distinct from bourgeois politics, which rely on political machinations and cleverness. Rather, the party's politics must be fully direct. 8. Ultimately, the international should determine the formation of factions. The international organization is a pyramid with an apex and sides mounted towards it. This is unity and centralization and must be steady on its base, stable from top to bottom, vice versa. Lastly, it discusses the stance of the party in regards to unions. The party must penetrate into the unions, bring large masses under the influence of the party, conquer leadership in them, take the central trade union apparatus at the final struggle, and, along with the masses, conquer the entire trade union apparatus and force all reformers out of the union movement and into the hands of the bourgeois state. To this end, secret committees and factories in charge of worker organization should be made, which connect to all unions. They should work with the unorganized masses, creating provisional agitation committees that include the whole factory workforce. Ultimately, at the end of things, a new organization which is distinct from trade unions should be established to act as a network of factory organs without the same limitation of unions. And that is the summary. I will now begin the full audiobook reading, and I hope you enjoy the session and attend next time as well. Welcome back to another reading of United Marxist Pact. We are continuing our sessions on the investigation of worker organization that can bring about the dictatorship of the proletariat. Today we will be reading the 1926 Third Communist International's Sixth Enlarged Executive Report by the Left of the Communist Party of Italy. In this text, it will include the fifth session, February 23rd, 1926, a continuation on discussion on the report of Comrade Zinoviev, the position of the left. Then ninth session, February 25th, 1926, discussion on the report of the executive. 14th session, March 4th, 1926, discussion on the Losowski's report on the trade union issue. 16th session, March 8th, 1926, after Zinoviev's conclusions. And 19th session, March 14th, 1926, another short statement, and then another one in the 20th. And then finally, the motion at the end. So let's get started. So this is the position of the left. Comrades, I think that it's absolutely impossible to limit our discussion to the scope of the draft theses and of the report. In the past years, in the various sessions of the Communist International, I have had the chance to endorse theses and statements that were at the moment very good and satisfactory. Not always so. In the development of the International's activity, facts have followed the hopes that such statements had aroused in us. It is therefore necessary to discuss and subject to a critical examination of the development of the International from a triple point of view. The events that took place after the last Congress, the perspective of the Communist International, and the tasks it must set itself to. We have a situation in the International which cannot be considered satisfactory. In a certain sense, we are in a state of crisis. This crisis did not start today. It has been there for a long time. This statement does not stem from us and other comrades of the extreme left. The facts prove that the existence of this crisis is acknowledged by all. Very often, especially in the critical moments of our general activity, watchwords are launched, which after all contain the admission that a profound change of our work methods is necessary. It is true that, in this very moment, it is stated that it is not the case to carry out a revision, that nothing needs to be changed, but this contains a clear contradiction. And to demonstrate that the existence of deviations and of a crisis within the International is here acknowledged by all and not just by the ultra-leftists, we want to here rapidly go over again the history of our International of its different stages. After the disaster of the Second International and formation of the Communist International was accomplished on the strength of the slogan, Formation of Communist Parties, everyone agreed that the objective relations of forces were favorable to the final revolutionary struggle, but if we were minus the organ of this struggle. It was said, the objective revolutionary conditions exist, and if we can have communist parties really capable of developing revolutionary activity, and all necessary conditions for a complete victory will be present. At the Third Congress, after the experience of many events and especially of the March Action in Germany in 1921, the International was compelled to admit that the formation of communist parties alone was not sufficient. Fairly strong sections of the Communist International had been formed in all the most important countries, but the problem of revolutionary action has not been solved. The German party had believed that it was possible to enter the field and start an offensive against the enemy, but was defeated. The Third Congress, having to face this problem, had to realize that the presence of communist parties is not sufficient when the objective conditions for the struggle are missing. The fact that, when we move to such an offensive attitude, the support of large masses should be assured was not taken into consideration. Not even the strongest communist party is able, in a generally revolutionary situation, to create the conditions and factors needed for an insurrection by a sheer act of will, unless it is able to rally large masses under its leadership. Okay. We're going to take this. Alright, so Communist parties require large amounts of the masses in order to push an insurrection despite imperfect revolutionary conditions. However, the party can expect the masses to join in under such circumstances. So even if, in other words, even if the conditions are there, even if the mass support isn't there, at least as far as the party can see, if the party takes action, then the masses should follow. That's my understanding of what's being said here. I'm not certain if that's really the case, but well, we'll see. Continuing. This was therefore a stage at which the International realized that a lot had to be changed. It has always maintained that in the speeches of the Third Congress, the idea of the United Front was already present. The idea was eventually formulated in the meetings of the successive Enlarged Executive in accordance with the political situation as illustrated by Lenin at the Third Congress. This is not completely correct, as in the meantime the situation had changed. In the period in which there existed an objective favorable situation, we haven't been able to utilize in the right way the good method of the offensive against capitalism. After the Third Congress, it was no longer a matter of simply launching a second offensive after having previously conquered the masses. The bourgeoisie had preceded us. It had opened, in the most important countries, the offenses against the workers' organizations and the communist parties, and the tactics of the conquest of the masses for the offensive, dealt with at the Third Congress, was turned into defensive tactics against the actions launched by capitalist bourgeoisie. This is in reference to fascism, by the way. These tactics are elaborated, together with the program to carry out, by studying the character of the enemy's offensives and by determining the concentration of the proletariat. This being the necessary condition for the conquest of masses by our parties and the passing, in not distant future, to counteroffensive. In this sense was then conceived a united front tactics. Okay, we're going to take this bit. So tactics emerge from studying the enemy's offensive and determining the concentration of the proletariat. These tactics, of course, require a program to carry them out. Back to the text. Now, I need no need to say that I have nothing to object to the CCs of the Third Congress on the necessity for mass solidarity. I only mention this issue to show that the International was once more forced to admit that it is not sufficiently mature to lead the struggle of the world proletariat. I don't understand how that follows. Okay, anyway, the application of the United Front led to the right wing errors, and these errors became increasingly clear after the Third Congress and especially after the Fourth Congress. These tactics, which can be applied only in a period of defensive struggle, that is, in a period in which the decomposition of capitalism is no more acute, these tactics we adopted gravely degenerated. In our opinion, these tactics were adopted without any attempt at making their real meaning perfectly clear. We were not able to guarantee the maintenance of the specific character of the Communist Party. Basically, by entering into United Front in the way that the Third International did, it made it so the Communist parties had to play second fiddle to a lot of these other organizations and make acquiescence and bring in people who were not actually communists, and it fucked over the actual party. So these parties became trending towards the right wing despite being communist. Continuing. It is not my intention here to repeat the critique we made of the tactics of the United Front as the majority of the Communist International applied them. We had nothing to object as long as it was a question of making the economic and immediate demands the basis of these tactics, demands that sprang up owing to the offensive of the enemy. But when, under the pretext that was just a bridge to continue our path towards proletarian dictatorship, the United Front was based on new principles, which directly concerned the central state power in the workers' government. We opposed this, declaring that the slogan made us exceed the limits of good revolutionary tactics. We communists know very well that the historical development of the working class must lead to the dictatorship of the proletariat. But this is an action which must influence the broad masses, and these masses cannot simply be won by our ideological propaganda. To the full extent to which we can contribute to the formation of the masses' revolutionary consciousness, we shall do it by the strength of our position and our stance at each stage of the unfolding of events. This is why stance cannot, and must not, be in contradiction with our position concerning the final struggle. In other words, the goal for which our party was specifically formed. Agitation around a slogan like the workers' government, for instance, can only sow disarray in the consciousness of the masses and even of the party and its general staff. Workers' government, by the way, is like, okay, let's elect workers to all the positions within the bourgeois government, and then that'll solve things. Entryism, in other words, but within the bourgeois state. Social democracy, right? We criticize all this from the beginning, so I shall content myself here with recalling in its broad outlines the judgment we expressed at the time. When we were faced with the mistakes to which his tactic had led, above all when the October 1923 defeat in Germany occurred, the International recognized it had been wrong. It wasn't just a case of minor mishap, it was a case of an error we would have to pay for, something having already acquired the first country for the proletarian revolution with the hope of conquering another great country. Something which, from the perspective of the world revolution, would have been of enormous importance. Unfortunately, all the International had to say about it was not a question of radically revising decisions of the Fourth World Congress. It is merely necessary to remove certain comrades who misapplied the United Front tactic. It is necessary to seek out those responsible. And they would be found on the right wing of the German party, as nobody was willing to acknowledge that the International as a whole bore the responsibility. Nevertheless, the theses were revised and a quite different formulation given to the workers' government. So, a reminder that the Third International essentially pushed for the Communist Party within Germany to ally with the SPD, the Social Democrat Party, and maintain this united front. But this is the exact thing that led to the SPD being able to eventually just ally with the liberals and the Freikorps and all the conservatives and monarchists in order to crush the communist movement that was developing. And then this, of course, led directly into fascism and Nazis coming into power because they had to continue what was going on there. Continuing, I would like here to establish the following. On more than one occasion, the comrades have been obliged to recognize the necessity of a radical change of line. The first time, the question of winning the masses had not been understood. The second time, it was a question of united front tactic, and at the Third Congress, a complete revision was carried out of the line followed up to that time. But this is not all. At the Fifth Congress, at the enlarged executive meeting in March 1925, it was once again perceived that everything was going badly. It was said, 6 years have passed since the foundation of the International, but none of its parties has succeeded in making the revolution. To be sure, the situation had deteriorated, and we are now confronted by a certain stabilization of capitalism. Nevertheless, it was explained that many things in the activity of the International would have to be changed. There is still no understanding of what had to be done, so the slogan of Bolshevization was launched. It is incomprehensible. What? 8 years have gone by since the victory of the Russian Bolsheviks, and we are now obliged to acknowledge that other parties are not Bolshevik? What profound transformation is necessary in order to raise them to the level of Bolshevik parties? Had nobody noticed this before? Oh, I see. They're saying that before everybody was assumed to be Bolshevik in structure, but now they're saying that they need to be Bolshevized. That doesn't make sense, but okay. Continuing. Why did we not raise a protest against the slogan of Bolshevization at the time of the Fifth Congress? Because nobody could be opposed to the statement that other parties must attain the revolutionary capability which made the victory of the Bolshevik Party necessary. Or possible, excuse me. But now is not just a question of a mere slogan, a mere watchword. We are dealing with facts and experience. Now it is necessary to draw out the balance sheet of Bolshevization and see what it has consisted in. I maintain that this balance sheet is negative from several points of view. There has been no resolution to the problem which had to be resolved. The method of Bolshevization applied to all parties has not secured their progress. I must examine the problem from various standpoints. First of all, from that of history. So, Bolshevization of the parties is, of course, following the model that the Bolsheviks put forward, which was quite specific to Russia's conditions, given the existence of a sympathetic peasantry, and all sorts of other things. Continuing. We have only one party, which has achieved the revolutionary victory, the Russian Bolshevik Party. The essential thing for us is to follow the same path as that which the Russian Party adopted to attain its victory. Quite right, but that is not enough. It is undeniable that the historical route followed by the Russian Party cannot display all the features of the historical development awaiting other parties. The Russian Party, it is a fact, fought in specific conditions in a country in which the feudal autocracy had not yet been overthrown by the capitalist bourgeoisie. Between the fall of the feudal autocracy and the conquest of power by the proletariat, too short a period intervened to be able to compare this development with that which the proletarian revolution will have to achieve in other countries. There was not enough time for a bourgeois state apparatus to be constructed on the ruins of the Tsars and feudal state apparatuses. The course of events in Russia does not offer us the basic experiences we need, in order to know how the proletariat is to overthrow the modern, liberal, parliamentary capitalist state, which has existed for many years and possesses a great defensive capacity. Once these differences are stated, the fact that the Russian Revolution has confirmed our doctrine, our program, and our conception of the role of the working class in the historical process is theoretically all the more important insofar as the Russian Revolution, even in these specific conditions, accomplished the conquest of power and the dictatorship of the proletariat realized through Communist Party. The theory of revolutionary Marxism found therein is a most grandiose historical confirmation. From the ideological point of view, this is of decisive historical importance. But so far as tactics are concerned, it is not enough. It is indispensable for us to know how to attack the modern bourgeois state, which defends itself in armed struggle even more effectively than did the Tsar's autocracy, but which in addition defends itself with the help of ideological mobilization and defeatist education of the working class by the bourgeoisie. This problem does not appear in the history of the Russian Communist Party. Let's see. Theory. But so, let's see. This needs to be brought up. Put this in here. Okay, so our tactics are different than in Russia because in Russia the enemy's offensive and concentration of the proletariat is different. The developed bourgeois states have greater ideological mobilization, so for example, mass media, right? Armed struggle, they have better militaries and better ability to arm paramilitary groups and so on and so forth, and defeatist education of the working class. This occurs as state ideological apparatuses and so on and so forth. Continuing. If, quote, Bolshevization is understood to mean that one may expect to find a solution to all the strategic problems of revolutionary struggle in the revolution achieved by the Russian Party, then this conception of Bolshevization is inadequate. The International must formulate a broader conception. It must find solutions to our strategic problems outside the Russian experience. The latter must be exploited to the full. None of its characteristic features must be neglected. It must be kept constantly in view. But we also need complementary elements deriving from experiences of the working class in the West. This is what must be said about Bolshevization from a historical and tactical point of view. The experience of tactics in Russia has not shown us how the struggle against the bourgeois democracy must be waged. It has given us no idea of the difficulties and tasks which the development of the proletarian struggle holds in store for us. Another problem of the side of the problem of Bolshevization will be found in the question of the reorganization of parties. In 1925, all of a sudden it was said the entire organization of the section of the International was wrong. The ABC of organization had not yet been applied. All problems have already been posed, but the essential has not been done yet. That is, the problem of our internal organization has not been solved. It is therefore acknowledged that we have been marching in a completely wrong direction. I know very well that there is no intention to confine the Bolshevization watchword to a mere and simple organizational problem. But this issue has an organizational side, and here it has been stressed as the most important one. Parties are not organized as the Bolshevik Party was and is organized. And their organization is not based on the principle of the workplace. They maintain the territorial type organization, which is supposed to be absolutely irreconcilable with the duties of a revolutionary party, or rather instead characteristic of social democratic parliamentary parties. If it is deemed necessary to transform, in this sense, the organization of our parties, and if this transformation is presented not as a practical measure suited to different countries and given conditions, but as a general and fundamental measure for the whole international, as the correction of a basic error, as a necessary premise for the development of our parties into really communist parties, then we cannot agree. Very strange, after all, that one should not have noticed this before. It is maintained that the passage to factory cells was already present in the theses of the Third Congress. It is quite odd that we have waited 4 years, from 1921 till 25, before putting into practice what it is alleged was decided. Okay, so let's see. Should we take this? Mark. No, it's fine. Continuing. The thesis according to which the Communist Party must be unconditionally organized on a factory nucleus basis is theoretically wrong. According to Marx and Lenin, and according to a principle which has been known and formulated in a very accurate way, the revolution is not a matter of the form of organization. Devising an organizational formula is not sufficient to solve the problem of the revolution. Problems facing us are force, not forms. How you respond to force is dependent on your form. Anyway, the Marxists have always fought against the syndicalist and semi-utopian schools which said, let's regroup the class in a given organization, trade union, cooperative, etc. The revolution will be done. Today, it is said, or at least a campaign is waged in this sense, we must build an organization based on a factory nuclei, and all the problems of the revolution will be solved. And it is added, the Russian party was able to make the revolution because it was constructed in this way. Okay. But again, let's throw out the party then. Let's throw out the necessity of the party if this is the case. Okay. Let's see. Divine organizational form is not the sole determining factor of the success of the revolution. Yeah, that's it. Okay. The problem is of force, not form. Oh, I didn't pause. Okay, anyway. Organizational form is not the sole deterring factor of the success of the revolution. Okay, cool. The problem is of force, not form. I don't know if anybody that they're accusing here would ever say that it is solely the organizational form that matters. City, please type in ESVC text rather than in there because I won't see that. I said Lin was in favor to make the bourgeois revolution first in 1890s and perhaps 1900s a better chance for proletarian revolution. He claimed that exploitation as Russia not lesser than bourgeois democrat country, but the condition for workers to struggle are harder. He also mentioned that beside big cities, a lot of proletarians are working alone or in small workshops. This isolation workers um, this isolation workers from each other also doesn't allow to bring social consciousness. Uh, no, he didn't say that. Hey, listen, we should bring about a bourgeois revolution because it makes the conditions for workers struggle easier. But quite the opposite, if I remember correctly. Anyway, once continuing, it will certainly be said that I am exaggerating, but numerous cowards will be able to confirm that the campaign was conducted with such theses. Okay, bro. What interests us is the impression that these watchwords leave the working class and party members. All concerns, as concerns the nucleus work, the impression was given that this is the infallible recipe of true communism and of revolution. I contest that the Communist Party should necessarily be constructed on the basis of factory cells. In the organization theses brought forward by Lin at their third Congress, it is repeatedly stated that the questions of organization there can be no solution which is equally good for all countries in all times. We do not contest that the situation in Tsarist Russia would such to justify the Russian Communist Party to organize itself on a factory nucleus basis. I don't want to dwell too much on this issue. In the exhaustive discussion before the Italian Congress, we have already acknowledged that in Russia existed several historical conditions supporting the structuring of organization on such basis. But we believe that nuclei present certain disadvantages in other countries if compared to the Russian situation. Why? Above all, because a group of workers organized as a nucleus cannot have the opportunity for discussing all political questions. In the very report of the Communist International Executive to this plenum is admitted that in almost no country factory nuclei have been able to deal with political problems. It has been said that there have been exaggerations, that parties' reorganization was made in a hurry, that is just a practical secondary error. But the fact can't be denied that the party has been deprived of its fundamental organization, an organization capable of discussing political problems. And this is not mere nothing, nor that the new organization, after a year of existence, is not yet performing this vital task. If such result is obtained, what we are facing are not individual errors, but rather a wrong approach to the whole problem. This is nothing to take lightly. The issue is very important, in our opinion. The fact that factory nuclei do not discuss political problems is not casual, as in a capitalist country, workers grouped in small and narrow boundaries of their enterprise do not have the possibility to face general problems and to connect to immediate requests with the ultimate end of communism. In a meeting of workers who are interested in the same immediate small problems and who don't belong to different trades, the issues concerning such immediate demands are widely discussed. But in this assembly, there aren't the conditions for a discussion on general problems, on the problems that concern the whole working class. That is, a class political work, which would be the task of the Communist Party, cannot be made. Okay, we're going to take this. All right, so different organizational forms and different conditions are necessary. So it needs to be a dynamic organization. Uh, yeah, that's what everybody recognizes. The organizational form needs to carry out necessary work. In the factories, they must be able to discuss general political problems that concern the whole working class. Without this, they can only speak about partial and immediate interests, though these also need to be discussed. You need to be able to talk about both and be productive while doing so. Um, so yeah, that's all it's saying. It's saying that hey, under different conditions and different kinds of factory work and whatnot, different kinds of organization or organizing within those things result in different uh, different things. So you can't just say one organizational format, done, done, done. Instead, you need a dynamic organizational format, which is able to fit in multiple conditions in multiple ways. Because, of course, there's no one size fits all solution in order to organize. And that's widely known. Nobody in the world will disagree with such a notion. That doesn't make it useless to talk about organizational format or organizational structure or anything like that. Quite the contrary. It becomes all important to talk about that. It becomes all important to center the organizational structure and to talk about those things so that we understand what best fits our conditions and how best to organize a structurally dynamic one. And this is something that you can apply science to. This is something that you can apply serious analysis to and talk about and systematize and formulate. I mean, this seems quite obvious to me. I don't think that anybody could reasonably disagree with such statements. But apparently, that is something that people will disagree with. Continuing. You'll probably say that we demand what is demanded by all right elements. That is to say, the organization of workers into territorial sections where the intellectuals lead in all discussions with never ending speeches. But this danger of demagogy and deceit by chiefs will always exist. It exists since the very inception of the proletarian party. But neither Marx nor Lenin, who seriously studied this problem, have ever thought of solving it by boycotting intellectuals and non proletarians. On the contrary, they repeatedly stress the historical necessity of role of deserters from the ruling class in the revolution. It is well known that, as a rule, opportunism and treason penetrate within the party and the masses through certain leaders. But the struggle against this danger must be led in other ways. Even if the working class could do without ex-bourgeois intellectuals, it could not renounce to leaders, agitators, journalists, etc. We would have to look for them in the ranks of the workers. So basically, they're saying, "Hey, look, these guys will be there, but you shouldn't go in on witch hunts to kick them out. You shouldn't just, whenever there's a problem or a failing within the party, you go and start blaming, naming names to blame game, right? Instead, you need to uh, focus on the tactics at hand and so on and so forth. Continuing. But the danger of corruption and demagogy inherent to these elements once they become leaders is as great as with them as with the intellectuals. But the danger of corruption and demagogy of these workers become leaders cannot be distinguished from that of corruption and the demagogy of intellectuals. In certain cases, ex-workers have played the most ignominious role in the labor movement. This fact is universally known. Moreover, the organization on a factory nucleus basis as realized today put an end to the role of the intellectuals. It is true to the contrary. It's the intellectuals that constitute at present, together with ex-workers, the entire apparatus of the party. The role of these social elements hasn't changed. On the contrary, it has become even more dangerous. We can't admit that these elements can be corrupted by their position as officials. And this problem exists because we gave them a position of far more responsibility, if compared to the past. As a matter of fact, in the small factory nuclei meetings, workers virtually have no freedom of movement. They do not have a sufficient basis to exert an influence on the party thanks to their class instinct. The danger we are warning against does not therefore lie in the possible influences of intellectuals, but rather in the fact that the nuclei workers get involved in the immediate needs of their companies. do not see the great problems of the general revolutionary development of their class. The new form of organization is therefore less suited to proletarian class struggle in the most serious and broadest sense of the term. In Russia, the great general problems of revolutionary development, the problem of the state, the seizure of power, were at all times on the agenda because the feudal and Tsar state apparatus is irredeemably doomed. Because each individual group of workers is placed, by the position in the social life and by the administrative pressure, in front of these problems. The opportunist deviations did not represent in Russia a particular problem, as the conditions for a corruption of the proletarian movement were absent, conditions that exist within the capitalist state, which is well trained in the use of arms of democratic concessions and collaborationist illusions. Okay, we're going to take this. All right, so the problems of revolutionary development, the state, and the seizure of power must be at all times on the agenda. This is the general political problems referenced right up here in this section. That evidently the format being used that was forced upon them didn't work to bring to the fore. It only allowed for partial immediate interests. Continuing. In addition, there's a difference of a practical nature. We must, of course, give into our party's organization the form that better suits the need to oppose retaliations. We must protect ourselves against the attempts to police to disband our party. In Russia, the organization by factory nuclei was the best form to this purpose because in the streets, the towns, public life, worker movement activities were made impossible by extremely strict police regulations. It was therefore materially impossible to organize outside the factory. Only in the factory workers were able to meet to discuss without surveillance their problems. Besides, it was only in the firm that class problems were brought in on the terrain of antagonism between capital and labor. The small economic issues concerning the firm, such as the problem of fines raised by Lenin, represented from a historical point of view progressive demands, together with the liberal demands workers and bourgeoisie jointly agitated against the Tsar's autocracy. But if compared to the question of the seizure of power in the struggle against bourgeois democracy for a new form of state, immediate proletarian demands become of a secondary importance. But as the question of conquest of power could only be raised after the fall of Tsarism, it was necessary to shift the center of the struggle in the workplace, that is, on the only terrain on which the autonomous proletarian party could appear and act. So the organization must be able to protect from police, organize in places without surveillance, meet regularly, focus on the antagonism between capital and labor. Condition of the meeting will create this ideally, reject calls for concessions from the state, etc., lead to autonomous action by the proletarian party. Okay. Continuing. Although in Russia, bourgeoisie and capitalists were Tsar's allies, they are at the same time those who had to bring him down, those who represented the premise to the fall of the autocratic power. That is why there has not been in Russia so complete a solidarity between industrialists and the state, as is the case in modern countries. In these countries, a complete solidarity between the state apparatus and the employers exists. It is their state, their political apparatus. It is the state apparatus proved to be historically an instrument of capitalism, to make available for employers the ad hoc instruments it created. When a workman endeavors to organize the others in a firm, the employer resorts to police, espionage, etc. That is why in modern capitalist party work in factories is far more dangerous. It is an easy matter for the bourgeoisie to find out what work is done in the factory. That is why we propose to have the basic organization of the party not be in factories and workshops, but rather outside. Let me mention here a minor episode. In Italy today, new police officers are being enrolled. The conditions for admittance are very strict, but for those who have a trade and can work in a factory, admittance is far easier. This demonstrates that the police are looking for people able to work in different branches of industry in order to utilize them to discover revolutionary work in the factories. Besides, we also learned that an international anti-Bolshevik association has decided to organize on the nuclei structure, the counterbalance to the communist movement. Another issue. It has been said here that another danger has appeared. The danger of workers' aristocracy. Clearly, this danger is distinctive in the periods when we are threatened by opportunism and by the role it tries to exert in the corruption of the labor movement. But the simplest way to infiltrate the influence of workers' aristocracy within our ranks is by no doubt that of the factory nuclei based organization. This is because the influence of the worker who has a higher position in labor hierarchy unavoidably dominates in workplace meetings. For all these reasons, and without making it a matter of principle, we ask that the basic organization of the party, for political and technical reasons, remain the territorial organization. This attitude of ours means that we will neglect party work in the factories. Do we deny that communist work in the factories is an important basis for our connection with the masses? Certainly not. The party must have its own organization. The party must have its own organization in the factories, but it must not form the basis of the party. It is essential to have party organization in the factories subjected to the party's political direction. It is impossible to be in contact with the working class without a factory organization, but this organization must be the communist fraction. To corroborate my thesis, let me say that in Italy, when fascism did not yet exist, we had created such a network of fractions and considered this activity to be the most important for us. In practice, were the communist fractions and firms in the trade unions that always responded to the specific duty of bringing us near to the masses. At the same time, the connection with the party gives these organs of work the political and class elements in the broadest sense of the term, elements that are not limited by the narrow ambience of trade and factory. We therefore favor a network of communist organizations and factories. But, in our opinion, the political work must be carried out within territorial organizations. I cannot here dwell on the deductions drawn on our behavior on this issue in the course of the pre Congress discussion in Italy. At the Congress and in our theses, we have developed in an exhaustive way the theoretical question of the nature of the party. It has been asserted that our point of view is not a class point of view. We are supposed to have pretended that the party let heterogeneous elements, such as the intellectuals, for instance, develop a greater activity. This is not true. We do not combat the organization solely based on factory nuclei because in the way the party will only be composed of workers. What scares us is the danger of laborism and workerism, the worst anti-Marxist danger. The party is proletarian because it is on the historical path of the revolution, of the struggle for the ultimate ends to which only the working class aspires. This is what makes of a party a proletarian party, not the automatic criterion of its social composition. The character of the party is not comprised by the active participation of all those who take part to its work, accept its doctrine, are willing to fight for its class ends. See, this goes against what the previous text said. Previous text was claiming that the dictatorship of the proletariat is synonymous with only workers being in positions of a political power. So that right there is workerism. Um, so there's some confusion here, I think. Mind these are written by different people, so you know maybe they need to do some organic centralism and kick out the person who disagrees. I don't know, but they say they don't do that, but evidently they have to in some way, don't they? I don't know. When no, we don't. Well, no. This is useful. All right. The party must not fall into workerism or laborism. The party is proletarian not based on social composition, but instead on the aim it has. If the aim of the is a revolution with the ultimate end of communism, then it's a proletarian party. At least that's what I believe that it's saying. Back to the text. The character of the party is not comprised of the active participation of all those who take part of its work, accept its doctrine, are willing to fight for its class ends. What? The character of the party is not compromised. Oh, compromised, like not comprised, compromised, as in it is not harmed. Okay, yes, we'll add that. The character is not harmed by the active participation of other social classes, so long as they take part in their work, accept party doctrine, are willing to fight for proletarian class interests. Okay. They should not be using that word. It's too close to another one, which completely changes things. Anyway, all that can be said on this terrain in favor of factory nuclei is con-demagogy, which, although resting on the watchword of Bolshevization, straightforwardly leads us to repudiate the struggle of Marxism and Leninism against the trite, mechanical, and defeatist conception of opportunism and Menshevism. I shall now move on to another aspect of Bolshevization, that of the internal regime which holds sway inside the party and the Communist International. Here, a new discovery has been made. What all our sections lack is the iron discipline of the Bolsheviks, as exemplified by the Russian Party. An absolute ban on factions is proclaimed, and it is decreed that all party members must participate in the common task, whatever their opinions may be. In this field, too, I think the question of Bolshevization has been posed in a very demagogic way. If we cannot put the question like this, does just anyone have the right to form a faction? Then every communist will answer no. But the question cannot be put in this way. There are already results showing that the methods used have served neither the party nor the international. This question of internal discipline and factions must be approached from a Marxist viewpoint, in a quite different and more complex way. We are asked, what do you want? Do you want the party to resemble a parliament in which everyone has a democratic right to bid for power and strive to secure a majority? But this is the wrong way to pose a question. If it is posed like this, there's only one possible answer. Of course, we would be against such a ridiculous regime. It is true that we must have an absolutely homogeneous Communist Party, without differences of opinion and different groupings within it. But this statement is not a dogma. It is an a priori principle. It is an end for which we can and must fight in the course of development which will lead to the formation of the true Communist Party. On condition, that is, that all ideological, tactical, and organizational questions have been correctly posed and resolved. Within the working class is the economic relations in which the various groups exist which determine the actions and initiatives of the class struggle. The political party has a role of gathering together and uniting whatever these actions have in common, from the point of view of the revolutionary goals of the working class of the world as a whole. Unity inside the party, the suppression of internal differences of opinion, the disappearance of factional struggles will be a proof that the party is on the best path for carrying out tasks correctly. But when differences of opinion do arise, this means that errors of party policy have occurred, that the party does not have the capacity to successfully fight these deviantist tendencies which, at given moments, tend to appear in the working class movement. When cases of non-observance of discipline arise, they are symptomatic of the fact that the party has still not achieved this capacity. Discipline, then, is a point of arrival, not a point of departure, not a platform that is somehow indestructible. Moreover, this corresponds to the voluntary nature of entry into our organization. So the remedy for the frequent cases of lack of discipline cannot be sought in some kind of party penal code. Okay, we're going to take this, and I'm going to keep reading to see if there's anything else. before going in and summarizing it. So how much longer is this section? Significantly. Gotcha. A regime of terror has recently established itself in our parties, a kind of sport, which consists in intervening, punishing, and annihilating, and all of it conducted with great gusto, as though it was precisely the ideal of party life. The leftist circular firing squad right here. The heroes of these brilliant operations even seem convinced that they themselves constitute a proof of revolutionary capacity and energy. I, on the contrary, maintain that real revolutionaries, the best revolutionaries, are, in general, those comrades who are victims of these extraordinary measures, and who patiently put up with them so as to not destroy the party. I consider that this squandering of energy, this sport, this struggle within the party has nothing to do with the revolutionary work we should be carrying out. The day will come when we shall strike down and destroy capitalism. It is on that terrain that the party will give evidence of its revolutionary power. We do not want anarchy in the party, but neither do we want a regime of continuous reprisals, which is the very negation of party unity and cohesion. At present, the official point of view is as follows. The present leadership is eternal. It can do as it likes because whenever it takes measures against those who speak out against it, whenever it annihilates intrigue and opposition, it is always right. But there's no merit in repressing revolts because they shouldn't be happening in the first place. Party unity is evidenced by what it achieves, not by a regime of threats and terror. Clearly, we do not need sanctions in our statutes, but they should only be applied in exceptional circumstances and not become the normal and general procedure inside the party. When there are elements who flagrantly abandon the common path, then clearly action must be taken against them. But when in an organization recourse to a code of sanctions becomes a rule, it means that the organization is not exactly perfect. Sanctions should be used in exceptional cases and not become the rule, kind of sport, the ideal of party leadership. This is what has to change if we want to form a solid bloc in the true sense of the word. And then maybe we should just take no. We'll take this. Going to take this. And then going to take this. Okay, let's go back up and summarize these. Alright, so the party should aim to be homogenous without differences of opinion or different groupings. The state of being requires all ideological, tactical, and organizational questions be correctly posed and resolved. Political party must gather and unite whatever actions and initiatives of the class struggle exist into a whole. With internal unity, suppression of differences of opinion, and an end of factions, it means the party is on the best path. When the party fails that this is an issue of the party, not the individual. Solutions to deviations cannot be penal and must be systemic. I think that this conception of continuous reprisals, the leftist circular firing squad and all that, I think that it's referencing the principles of criticism and self-criticism. These continuous reprisals, and they're saying that this harms party unity and cohesion. Yes, if there is in fact a penal basis for it. If the criticism of others results in some poor result on another person, rather than it being the case that the person that's subject to it or carrying it out doesn't result in any problems, then it shouldn't be a problem. So statutes need sanctions for breaching, but only in exceptional cases. Normal and general procedures of the party must be without censure. Back to the text. The thesis proposed here contains a few fine phrases in this respect. A little more freedom is conceded. Perhaps it's come somewhat late. Possibly it is thought safe to give a little more freedom to people who have been, quote, crushed and can no longer stir hand or foot. But let us move away from the theses and consider the facts. It has always been said that our party should be built on a principle of democratic centralism. It would perhaps be no bad thing if we could find another expression of democracy instead of democracy, but the formula was provided by Lenin. How is democratic centralism to be achieved? Well, of course, through the eligibility of all leading comrades and consultation of the masses of the party on certain key questions. Obviously, there may be exceptions to this rule in the Revolutionary Party. It is permissible for the leadership on occasion to say, Comrades, the party would normally be consulting you, but since the struggle against our enemies has just entered a dangerous period and there's not a minute to lose, we are acting without consulting you. But what is dangerous is to give the impression of a consultation when what is really involved is an initiative taken from above. That is to abuse the leadership's control of the party apparatus and press to pursue its own ends. In Italy, we said that we accept dictatorship but detest the Giolidian methods. For his bourgeois democracy anything but a method of trickery. And can this be the kind of democracy you're granting us within the party? Can this be what you are striving to achieve? And we say a dictatorship would be better, which at least does not mask itself hypocritically. What must be introduced is a genuine form of democracy. In other words, one that allows the leadership to take advantage of the party apparatus for good ends. Otherwise, there cannot fail to be malaise and dissatisfaction, especially amongst the working class. You must have a healthier regime in the party. Okay, I don't think that needs to be copied. They're saying we need democracy. We need workers to be able to have say. It is absolutely indispensable that the party should be allowed to form an opinion and express it with frankness. At the Congress of the Italian Party, I said that the mistake had not been making a distinction within the party between agitation and propaganda. Agitation is carried out among a large mass of people to make clear a given number of very simple ideas. Propaganda, by contrast, concerns a relatively limited stratum of comrades to whom we set out a greater number of complex ideas. The error that we succumbed to was to limit ourselves to agitation within the party, to consider the mass of party members, in principle, as mentally handicapped, to treat them as elements that can be set in motion and not as an active factor of the common effort. An agitation based on formula learnt by heart is up to a certain extent conceivable, but is intended to set the broad masses in motion, and if initiative and consciousness plays a secondary role. But within the party, things are completely different. We ask that within the party, these methods are stopped. The party must gather within itself that part of the working class which possesses class consciousness and in which class consciousness prevails. Unless you advocate precisely the elitist theory that previously served as an accusation, and a baseless accusation, against us. It is necessary that the mass of party members develops a collective political consciousness, that they study the problems that the Communist Party faces in depth. And this sense is a matter of the utmost urgency to change the internal regime of the party. So this was actually resolved with the innovation of memes. I have on good authority that left communists do in fact enjoy memes, and everybody does, and it doesn't matter how theoretically advanced they are. So memes are universalized. Continue. And now I will come on to fractions. I take the view that to raise the problem of fractions as a moral problem from the point of view of the penal code is not the correct line of action. Is there any example of a historic history of a comrade forming a fraction for his own amusement? Such a thing has never happened. Is there a historical example of opportunism insinuating itself into a party through the fraction? The organization of fractions serving as the basis for defeatist mobilization of the working class. and of the Revolutionary Party being saved thanks to the intervention of the fraction killers. No. Experience has shown that opportunism always infiltrates our ranks under the guise of unity. It is in its interest to influence the largest possible mass, and it is therefore behind the screen of unity that it puts forward its most deceitful proposals. Moreover, the history of fractions goes to show that fractions do no honors to the party in which they have formed. They do honor to those who have formed them. The history of fractions is a history of linen, is a history of not of the attacks against the existence of parties, but of their crystallization and their defense against opportunist influences. It is not a history of attacks against their existence. When a fraction is being organized, one must have evidence before saying that it is, directly or indirectly, bourgeois schemes to insinuate inside the party. I don't think that, as a rule, this kind of maneuver takes such forms. At the Congresses of the Italian Party, the issue was posed by us with reference to the party left. We all know the history of opportunism. When does the group become the representative of bourgeois influences within the proletarian party? In general, such groups have found a fertile ground among union officials or among party members of parliament. That is, among comrades who, with reference to questions of party strategy and tactics, behaved as the spokesmen of class collaboration, the alliance with other political and social lineups. If we're talking about fractions that need to be crushed, one should at least be able to prove that they are in contact with the bourgeoisie, or linked to the bourgeois circles or milieus, or based on personal relations with them. If such an analysis is not possible, then we need to find the historical reasons for the birth of the fraction rather than condemning a priori. Okay. We're going to take this. I think that's self referential. Continuing. The birth of a fraction shows that something has gone wrong in the party. To remedy the ill, it is necessary to seek out the historical causes which gave rise to it, that gave rise to the fraction, and that prompted it to take shape. The causes lie in the ideological and political errors of the party. The fractions are not the sickness, but merely the symptom. And if you want to treat a sick organism, you have to try to discover the causes of the sickness, not combat the symptoms. Besides, in the majority of cases, what one faced was with a group of comrades who were not in fact making an attempt to create an organization or anything of the kind, but rather seeking to express currents of opinions and tendencies within the normal, regular, and collective activity of the party. The resort to fraction hunting, muckraking campaigns, police surveillance, and the sowing of mistrust between comrades, a method which in fact constituted the worst factionalism developing in the higher echelons of the party, has only made our movement situation worse and pushed all considered and objective criticisms towards the path of factionalism. Let's see. Let's take this. Continuing. Such methods cannot ensure party unity. They paralyze and render it impotent instead. A radical transformation of our methods of work is absolutely indispensable. If that does not happen, the consequences will be extremely serious. Let us take, for example, the crisis of the French party. What was the procedure in the party against the fractions? A very bad procedure, for instance, with respect to a syndicalist faction which is on the point of formation. Certain comrades expelled from the party have returned to their former affectations, are publishing a periodical to explain their ideas. They are, of course, wrong, but what has caused them to do so? The naughty boys, Rosemer and Mon. Okay. The naughty boys, Rosemer and Monate, did not act on the impulse or of a caprice. The causes for their action are to seek in the errors the French party and the entire international. Sure, I just want to copy that in. Oh my, naughty boys. Okay, continuing. When we entered the field of the ideological ground against the syndicalist errors, we were able to wring large layers of workers from the influx of syndicalist and anarchist elements. Now these concepts emerge again at the surface. Why? The internal party regime, its excessive Machiavellianism, participated in giving a bad impression to the working class and made a resurgence of those theories possible, and the prejudice that the political party is itself something dirty, and that only the economic struggle can save the proletarian class. These fundamental errors threaten to reappear within the proletariat because the international and the communist parties have not been able to demonstrate by deeds and by simple theoretical statements the enormous difference which exists between a policy conceived in a revolutionary and Leninist spirit and that of the old social democratic parties whose degeneration before the war has caused a reaction as a reaction to birth of syndicalism. Within the French proletariat, the old theories of economic action and the opposition to any political activity had some success. This is due to a number of mistakes made in the political line of the Communist Party. So then a guy named Simard says, "You say that fractions have their causes in the errors of the party's leadership. But the right faction in France is formed at the very moment when the central acknowledged and corrected its errors." And then the speaker says, "Comrade Simard, you're planning to meet the Lord with the sole merit of having acknowledged your errors, then you won't have done enough for the salvation of your soul. I believe, comrade, that is necessary with our proletarian strategy and tactics to expose the errors these anarcho syndicalists make. Within the working class, the impression has developed that the Communist Party there are the same deficiencies existing in all other political parties. That is why certain differences still exist towards our party. Diffidence still exists towards our party. This diffidence is originated by the methods and maneuvers applied in our ranks. One would say that we act not only towards the outside of the party, but also in the party's internal political life, as if good, quote, politics was an art, a technique common to all parties. If we were to work while carrying in our pocket a Machiavellian manual of political cleverness. But the party of the working class has a duty of introducing a new form of politics, which has nothing in common with the base and deceitful methods of bourgeois parliamentarism. If we can't demonstrate this to the proletariat, we will never be able to acquire a useful and vigorous influence on it, and anarcho syndicalists will have the upper hand. The right fraction in France, I do not hesitate saying so, is a healthy phenomenon. It does not in itself represent the permeation of petty bourgeois elements in the party. The theory and tactics it advocates are wrong, but in part they are very useful reaction to political errors and the unsatisfactory internal regime of the party. The responsibility of these errors, though, does not fall only upon the central of the French party. It is a general line of the International to determine the formation of fractions. Indeed, on the question of the United Front, I'm on a completely antithetical position with respect to the point of view of the French right. I believe it is right when it said that the deliberations of the Fifth Congress are not at all clear. They are completely unsatisfactory. On the one hand, in many instances, the United Front from above is admitted. On the other, it is added that the social democracy is the left wing of the bourgeoisie and that our task must be to expose its leaders. This position is untenable. The French workers are sick and tired of an application of the United Front as that made in France. Of course, numerous leaders of the French opposition are moving on a wrong way, diametrically opposed to a really revolutionary attitude, when they draw their conclusions in the sense of a, quote, loyal United Front and a coalition with social democracy. So we're going to take this, but basically just to this line right here. This is the line that's actually important. Okay. It is obvious that when the problem of the right is confined to the question whether it's acceptable to collaborate to a magazine that is out of party control, there can be only one answer. But this is not the way to solve the problem. We must try to correct our mistakes and subject the political line of the French party to a thorough exam. The same should be done in many occasions with the Internationalist line. The problem is not solved by applying against the opposition, against Lariat, etc., the rules of a petty catechism on personal behavior. To correct errors is not sufficient to chop off heads. One should rather find out and eliminate the initial errors, which cause a discontent and deter the formation of fractions. Okay. Actually, we'll try and get this entire thing. It is said to us to find mistakes in our machinery of Bolshevization, we have the International. The majority of the International must intervene whenever a party central makes a mistake. This is a guarantee against deviations within national sections. But in practice, the system has failed. Germany provides an example of this kind of international intervention. The central of the KPD had become omnipotent and made impossible any opposition in the party. Still, there had been somebody above it at a given moment, has condemned all crimes and errors perpetrated by the central, Moscow's executive, with its open letter. Is this a good method? No, it certainly isn't. What reflexes does such an action have? We have an example of it in Italy during the discussion for the party congress. A good comrade, a literally orthodox one, is delegated to the Congress of the German party. He sees all that goes perfectly, an overwhelming majority voted for the theses of the International, and that the new central is elected in universal agreement with the exception of a negligible minority. The Italian delegate comes back and gives a very favorable report on the German party. He also writes an article in which he depicts it as a model Bolshevik party. It might well be that as a consequence of that, several comrades in our opposition have become supporters of Bolshevization. But 2 weeks later comes the open letter of the executive. It states that the internal life of the German party is very bad, that is read dictatorially, that its whole tactics is completely wrong, that serious mistakes have been made, that grave deviations have occurred, that the ideology is not Leninist. It is forgotten that the Fifth Congress, the left leadership of the Communist Party of Germany, had been proclaimed the most authentically Bolshevik. Now it is piteously overthrown by employing them with the same methods formerly used against with the right. The Fifth Congress watchword was, quote, "It's all Brandler's fault." Now it is said, "It is all Ruth Fisher's fault." I maintain that in this way we cannot draw the support of the working classes. It can't be said that even a couple of comrades are to be blamed for the mistakes. The International was there to follow the development of events. It could not, it should not, ignore both the competency of the leaders and their political deeds. Now, someone will say I am defending the German left just as the Fifth Congress I was accused of defending the right. But I don't solidarize, politically speaking, with any of the two. I'm of the opinion that, in both cases, the International must assume the responsibility of the mistakes that have been made. Yes, the International, which had solidarized in full with these groups, which has presented them as the best leadership, which entrusted them to the party. The intervention of the International Center in the affairs of the national sections had thus in several cases been the less fortunate. The question is, which are the International's methods of work, its relations with the national sections, and its way of forming their leading bodies? I already criticized our methods of work at the last Congress. There's no genuine collective collaboration in our leading bodies and congresses. The International Center appears quite alien to our sections, managing discussion within them and choosing them in each a faction to support. The center is backed on every question by all the other sections, which hope to, in this way, to assure themselves of better treatment when their own turn comes. At times, those who place themselves on such, quote, horse dealings are merely personal groupings of leaders. People tell us The international leadership derives from the hegemony of the Russian Party, which is justified by the fact that it made the revolution and harbors the internationalist headquarters. But this is why it's necessary to accord determinant importance to decisions prompted by the Russian Party, which is our leader. But then the problem arises of how the Russian Party resolves international questions. This is a question we have every right to pose. Since the most recent event, since the last discussion, this fulcrum of the whole system is no longer sufficiently stable. In the latest discussion in the Russian Party, we have seen comrades who claim to have an identical knowledge of Leninism and who unquestionably have an identical right to speak in the name of Bolshevik revolutionary tradition, each using quotations from Lenin against the other in argument, and each interpreting Russian experience in its own favor. Without going into the substance of the discussion, is it just this undeniable fact that I want to establish here? Who in this situation will decide in the last instance on international problems? One can no longer answer the Bolshevik old guard, for this reply leads in practice to no solutions. Thus, the fulcrum of the entire system resists objective investigation. But this means that it is clearly necessary to seek a different solution. We may compare our international organization to a pyramid. This pyramid must have an apex and sides which bounce towards that apex. This is how we may represent our unity and necessary centralization. But today, as a result of our tactics, the pyramid is standing dangerously on its apex. It must therefore be reversed and stood back onto its base so that it's stable again. Hence, our conclusion that on the question of Bolshevization is that we must not be satisfied with mere modifications of a secondary nature, but the whole system must be modified from top to bottom. Okay, I'm going to take this. Continuing. Having thus summed up the past action of the International, it is essential to give an appreciation of the present situation and of the future tasks. The general statement concerning stabilization has been accepted by everyone. It is therefore necessary to dwell on it. It is not therefore necessary to dwell on it. The decomposition of capitalism at present is a less acute stage. There have been certain vacillations with respect to the development of the general crisis of capitalism. We have before us a perspective of the definite decay of capitalism, but in my opinion, certain errors of appreciation have crept in with respect to the perspective. There are several ways to face the problem of perspective. Comrade Zinoviev has reminded us of a few useful things when he spoke on the double perspective of Lenin. If we proceed like a scientific society for the study of social events, we can arrive at objective conclusions of a more or less optimistic or more or less pessimistic character. And this is a manner which does not take events into account. But such a purely scientific perspective will not do for a revolutionary party which participates in all events, which is itself a factor of them, and which cannot express its function in a metaphysical way. On the other side, as concerns its exact knowledge of phenomena and its function in them, on the other as a will to action. Therefore, our party must stay at all times directly connected to its ultimate ends. The party cannot renounce its final task, its revolutionary will, even if the cold scientific perspective is unfavorable. It was not a banal scientific error, the fact that Marx expected the revolution in 1848, 1859, and 1870, and that Lenin after 1905 prophesied it was for 1907, exactly 10 years before its triumph. This rather demonstrates the sharpness of the revolutionary vision of these great chiefs. Nor was it an infantile exaggeration according to which a revolution at all times knocking at the door. Instead, the real revolutionary attitude, which remains unchanged in spite of all hardships of historical development. The issue of the perspective has for our parties an enormous interest, and it would deserve far more attention. I consider insufficient the one that says, quote, the situation has changed in a way that is unfavorable for us. We no longer have with us the situation of 1920, and this justifies the internal crisis in certain sections and in the international. End quote. No, this cannot help to explain the causes of some errors, and this can help to explain the causes of some errors, but does not justify them. From a political point of view, this is not enough. We cannot, we must not accept and consider unchangeable the present effective regime within our parties, just because the external situation is unfavorable. In this way, the question is incorrectly presented. It is obvious that, while our party is a factor of events, is at the same time a product of them. This also, if we succeed in creating a really revolutionary world party. Now, in what sense do events reflect this in this party? In the sense that the number of our members increases and our influence on the masses grows when the crisis of capitalism engenders a situation favorable to us. If, on the contrary, at any given moment the situation becomes unfavorable, it may well be that our forces get reduced in number. But when that occurs, we must not allow our ideology to suffer from it. Not just our tradition and our organization, but also our political line must remain intact. So we're going to take this and then dot dot dot. Actually, no, it's a dot dot. And then put this here. Okay. Continuing. If we believe that to prepare the parties to their revolutionary task, we must exploit the situation of increasing crisis of capitalism, we are going to give ourselves a scheme of perspectives that's completely wrong, as the economical situation should do us a favor of remaining revolutionary for a longer time, so we can, at the right moment, pass from preparation to action. If, after a period of uncertain economic situation, the crisis suddenly gets acute, we will be unable to exploit it because, owing to this wrong attitude, the parties will find themselves in a state of bewilderment, confusion, impotence. This demonstrates that we are not able to make good use of the experience of opportunism in the Second International. While we can't deny that before the World War there had been a period of capitalist blossoming and a favorable economic situation, but while it can in a sense explain the opportunist decomposition of the Second International, it does not justify opportunism. We have fought this idea and refuse to believe this opportunism is a necessary fact, historically imposed by events. We assert the thesis that the movement should resist a fatalist view, and the Marxist left has fought opportunism as far back as before 1914 by advocating the creation of healthy and revolutionary proletarian parties. The issue must therefore be approached in a different way. Even if the current situation and economic prospects do not favor us, or at least are relatively unfavorable, we must not resign ourselves to accepting opportunist deviations and justifying them under the pretext that their causes are to be found in the objective situation. And if, despite everything, an internal crisis takes place, its causes and the means to heal it must be sought elsewhere, that is, in the party's activity and political line, which today is not what it should be. This also relates to the question of leaders that Comrade Trotsky raised in the preface to 1917, an analysis of the causes of our defeat. And I entirely agree with the conclusions he came to. Trotsky does not speak of leaders as though heaven needs to delegate men for this purpose. On the contrary, he approaches the problem quite differently. Even leaders are a result of party activity, of party working methods, and a product of the confidence the party is able to inspire. If the party, in spite of changeable and often unfavorable circumstances, follows a revolutionary line and fights opportunist deviation, then the selection of leaders, the formation of a general staff will go well. And during the final struggle, we will have, if not always a linen, at least a compact and courageous leadership. Something that today, given the current state our organizations are in, we have little cause to expect. There is another scheme of perspective which must be fought against and which confronts us when we turn our attention from the purely economic analysis to that of the social and political forces. It is generally accepted that we must consider the fact that a left petty bourgeois party is in power as a political situation favorable to our preparation and to our struggle. This wrong perspective is, first of all, a contradiction of the first, because it most frequently happens in the state of economic crisis favorable to us that the bourgeoisie organizes a right government for a reactionary offensive, which means that objective conditions become unfavorable to us. To get a Marxist solution to the problem, these commonplaces must be abandoned. Generally speaking, it is not true that the existence of a left bourgeois government will be favorable to us. The contrary may be the case. Historical example has showed us how absurd it would be to imagine that in order to lighten our task, a so-called middle-class government with a liberal program would make its appearance. A government which would enable us to organize an effective and united struggle against a weakened state apparatus. So basically, it's like, hey, listen, if the bourgeoisie understood that that, sorry, let me rephrase that. The bourgeoisie understand the threat of communism, may not explicitly, but certainly implicitly. They understand their class interests on an instinctual and direct level. What this means is that they won't simply hand us the keys to the kingdom. They won't just go in and be like, oh, well, democracy said such and such, and therefore we'll just move forward with that, even if it weakens our ability to maintain class domination, right? So this conception is false. At any point, the bourgeoisie will reconstitute their government to best their state in order to best combat our development. Doesn't matter what democracy has to say, it doesn't matter who happens to be in power at any given time. They will respond dynamically to our own dynamic activity. So you shouldn't get up and start and say, oh, one particular thing is better for us, when in reality it's like, why bother spending all the energy trying to get the enemy to take on a particular form which we think is advantageous to us, when instead we can focus on ourselves and then through that self focus force changes on the enemy, right? Don't go through the enemy's traps and hoops in order to get them to follow your end of things. Instead, put the traps and hoops yourself. Continuing. Here too, we are faced by the influence of an erroneous interpretation of the Russian experience. In the Revolution of February 1917, after the fall of the former state apparatus, a government was constituted that based itself on the bourgeois and liberal pay bourgeoisie. But that was not a solid state apparatus able to substitute Tsar's autocracy with the economical rule of capital and a modern parliamentary representation. Before such an apparatus could be created by the proletariat, led by the Communist Party, was able to successfully attack the government and seize power. It can be believed that in other countries things will similarly develop. That one fine day the government will pass from the hands of the bourgeois parties to those of the intermediate parties. And in such a circumstance, the state apparatus will be weakened, and that, consequently, it will be easy for the proletariat to overthrow it. But this simplified perspective is completely wrong. What is the situation like in all other countries? Can we consider a change of government, by which a left government takes the place of a right government, for instance, the left coalition in France in place of the National Bloc, as a historical change of the state foundations? It is possible that the proletariat exploits this period to strengthen its positions. But if what we have here is mere and simple passing from a right to a left government, then the situation favorable to communism, of a general breakup of the state apparatus, is not there. Do we have a concrete historical examples to illustrate the alleged development according to which a left government would pave the way to a proletarian revolution? No, we don't. In 1919, we witnessed in Germany the access of a left bourgeois bloc to power. We even witnessed the management of affairs in the hands of the Social Democrats. In spite of the military defeat of Germany, in spite of the terrible crisis, the state apparatus did not undergo any substantial transformation able to make proletarian victory any easier. Not only the Communist Revolution failed, the Social Democrats were its executioners. After we shall have promoted by our tactics the access to power of a left government, we will have obtained more favorable conditions for ourselves? No, that is not the case at all. It is a Menshevik conception to imagine that the state machine will be different in the hands of the lower middle classes to what is in the hands of the big bourgeoisie, and to consider such a program as a transition period leading to the epoch of the seizure of power. Certain parties of the bourgeoisie have an appropriate program and bring forward appropriate demands with the object of attracting the middle classes. Generally speaking, this is not a process in which power passes from one social group to another. It is only a new defensive method of the bourgeoisie against us. And when this takes place, we cannot say that this is the most propitious moment of our intervention. This change can be utilized, but only provided our preceding position has been perfectly clear and we have not invoked the success of a left bloc element. For instance, in Italy, can it be said that fascism is the triumph of the right bourgeoisie over the left bourgeoisie? Certainly not. Fascism is something more than that. It is a synthesis of two methods of defense of the bourgeois class. The recent acts of the fascist government have clearly shown that the semi-bourgeois and the pay-bourgeois composition of fascism does not prevent the latter from being a direct agent of capitalism. As a mass organization, the fascist organization has 1 million members. It is endeavoring not only to strike down ruthlessly its opponents, especially the adversaries who dare attack the state machine, but also to mobilize the masses by means of social democratic permeation methods. On this field, fascism has suffered evident defeat. This bears out our point of view on the class struggle. But what is most forcibly shown by all of this is the absolute impotence of the middle classes. During the last few years, they have accomplished 3 complete evolutions. In 1919 to 20, they crowded our revolutionary meetings. 1921 to 22, they formed cadres of black shirts. Uh, these are the footmen of Mussolini. In 1924, they went over to the opposition after Matteotti's assassination. Um, that, for reference to the previous sections, that was basically a left labor organizer who remained within the government, was assassinated brutally at that. And there's vast internal schisms and so on and so forth. So they're saying that the middle class went over and supported the the break and the schism on the side of the left. Continuing, today they're coming back to fascism. Always with the strongest is their motto. Another fact deserves to be remarked. In the programs of all left parties and governments is the principle that, although all should have the fundamental liberal quote unquote guarantees, it is necessary to make an exception for those parties pursuing the overthrow of state institutions. That is, for the communist parties. The wrong conception of the advantages which we could derive from the access to the power of a left bloc government consists in imagining the middle class as capable of an independent solution to the problem of power. In my opinion, there's a very serious error in the so-called new tactic that has been applied in Germany and in France, and with which the proposal made by the Italian party to the Aventino anti-fascist opposition is connected. I cannot understand how a party so rich in revolutionary traditions as our German party can take seriously the accusation of the Social Democrats that was playing Hindenburg's game by bringing forward an independent candidature. Generally speaking, the plan of the bourgeoisie for the counter-revolutionary mobilization of masses consists in substituting the class contrast between bourgeoisie and proletariat with a political and historical dualism. The Communist Party instead insists on class dualism, not because it is the only possible dualism in the social perspective and with reference to modifications of parliamentary power, but rather because it is the only dualism that is historically able to lead the revolutionary overthrow of the class state apparatus and to the formation of a new state. But we cannot bring home this dualism to the consciousness of the masses merely by ideological declarations and abstract propaganda. We can only do so by our actions and by the evidence and clarity of our political position. Uh, 1 second. Here we go. When it was proposed to the anti fascist bourgeoisie in Italy to constitute itself as an anti parliament in which the communists would have participated, even if it was stated in our press that no confidence should be placed in these parties, even if the pretense was made to expose them by this means, in reality, we contributed to encouraging the masses to expect the overthrow of fascism by the Aventino, to make them believe in the possibility of a revolutionary struggle and the formation of an anti state not on a class basis, but rather on the basis of collaboration with the pay bourgeois element, and even with entirely capitalist groupings. In view of the failure of the Aventino, this maneuver did not result in bringing the masses into a class front. This new tactic was not only alien to resolution of the Fifth Congress, it was, in my opinion, even alien to the principles and the program of communism. And we're going to get this bit. All right, so the Communist Party is based on class dualism and that is able to lead to revolution. This dualism cannot be through only propaganda. It needs action and clarity of position through that action. Back to the text. What are our tasks for the future? This assembly cannot concern itself seriously with this problem without confronting, in its full dimensions and all of its gravity, the fundamental question of the historical relations between Soviet Russia and the capitalist world. Alongside the problem of the revolutionary strategy of the proletariat, the problem of the international peasant movement, and the problem of colonial and oppressed peoples, the question of the Russian Communist Party's state policy is today the most important of all for us. The Russian Party must assess the interplay of class relations inside Russia, take the necessary steps to check the influence of the peasants and the burgeoning petty bourgeois strata, and defend itself from external pressures, which are today merely economical and diplomatic, but which tomorrow might assume a military aspect. Yeah. Since a revolutionary overturn has not yet occurred in other countries, it is necessary to coordinate policy in Russia as closely as possible with the overall revolutionary policy of the proletariat. I do not intend to go fully into this question here, but I maintain that in this struggle, yes, we must certainly base ourselves first and foremost upon the Russian working class and its Communist Party. But it is of fundamental importance that we also base ourselves upon the proletariat of the capitalist states, whose class sense is determined by direct contiguity with its capitalist adversary. The problem of Russian policy cannot be resolved within the narrow limits of the Russian movement alone. The direct collaboration of the whole Communist International is absolutely essential. Without such collaboration, not only revolutionary strategy in Russia, but our own policies in the capitalist states will be seriously threatened. A tendency may emerge to water down the character and role of the Communist parties. We are already, in fact, under attack in this sense, not only within our own ranks, but from the social democrat and opportunist circles. Related to this is the question of our campaign for the international trade union unity and our attitude to the Second International. We are all agreed here that the Communist parties must unconditionally maintain the revolutionary independence. All the same, it is necessary to warn of the possible emergence of a tendency to replace Communist parties with organizations of a less explicit kind, which would not have strict class aims and would exert a function of political weakening and neutralization. In the present situation, it is our unquestionable common duty to defend the international and communist character of our party organization against any liquidationist tendency. Okay. Actually, we'll just take this entire paragraph. All right, so the party must not water down its message, as that leaves it open to being captured by pay bourgeois and social democrat opposition. Independence must be maintained, but relations must also be maintained between the party and other worker organizations. And finally, we must defend against any liquidationist tendencies which weaken our position. liquidationists, as I'm sure you all know, is the tendency to essentially liquidate sections of the party. For example, um, the electoral or the legal struggle section of the party, um, wherein people are struggling within the bounds of legal framework, making money to support party activity, so on and so forth. Um, that's one example. Um, there's more beyond that, but I hope that you get what I mean there. Back to the text. After the criticisms we have made, can we consider the international, such as it exists today, adequately armed for this double task of working out a correct strategy both for Russia and for other countries? Can we demand, for instance, immediate discussion of all Russian problems by this assembly? To this question, we must, alas, reply in the negative. It is absolutely essential to carry out a serious revision of the internal regime of our parties and to include on their immediate agenda the problem of tactics on a world scale and the state policy in the USSR. But tackling these questions requires a new course with completely different methods. In the report and the theses which have been proposed, we find no adequate basis for resolving these matters. What we need is not official optimism. We have to understand that is not small methods of the kind we have too often seen employed here, which can equip us to carry out the grandiose tasks which confront the general staff of the world revolution. So this version is taken from the Comintern publication International Press Correspondence. This is volume 6, number 20, 17th March 1926, produced in Vienna. Next up is the ninth session on February 25th, 1926. This is the discussion on the report of the executive. And this is Bordiga. Comrades, in my speech, I dealt with the general issues of the politics of the international. Several speakers did not confine themselves to discuss my general statements and spoke also the Italian problems I had absolutely not touched on. I am therefore compelled to answer very briefly to the things that have been said here. Let us speak, first of all, of the famous system of the new theory of the Italian left. It is said, quote, the system of Bordiga, the theory of Bordiga, the metaphysics of Bordiga, end quote, and it is established that here I am completely alone, and that I always and only defend my personal views and my personal critique. My attitude is presented as of an absolutely individual nature. But although very only recently the quote official defeat of the Italian left has been acknowledged, something on which I will say here in a few more words, I must again repeat that I am not going to entertain this audience with individual intellectual products. I instead represent the thought of a group within the Italian communist movement. Some will say that is an insignificant group, a small minority. But this, I believe, is not correct. A comrade, a worker of the left who lives in Russia, told me a few days ago some interesting things. Quote, in a certain way, we are playing an international role because the Italian people are people of migrants in the economical and social sense of the word, and after the advent of fascism, also in the political sense. End quote. And actually, after the March on Rome, thousands of good comrades were dispersed throughout the world and tried to give their best in different parties. The same comrade made a naive statement, which I find extremely interesting. Quote, it happens to us as with the Jews, and if in Italy we have been defeated, we can be consoled by the fact that although Jews are not strong in Palestine, they are strong elsewhere. End quote. What I'm representing here are not, therefore, merely personal ideas, but rather the expression of the thought of a whole group. Let's take a look at the famous system of the Italian left. In the course of the discussion for our party's Congress, it appeared that, with reference to several fundamental issues such as the nature of the party, role of the party, relation between party activity and general situation, between us and, it is stated, Marxism and Leninism. Of course, I can't dwell at large on the great theoretical questions. All the material of the Italian Congress is available, and from it can be seen that Although we openly admit to systematically diverge in given tactical issues from the International's guideline, with a particular reference to the development of the revolutionary strategy and the passage from the Russian Revolution to World Revolution. We assume a completely correct theoretical position from the Marxist point of view, with reference to general and programmatic questions. The issue of the nature of the party and its historical role, or the relationship between the party and the masses. Once more, we believe that precisely those who are criticizing us are about to deviate from such correct positions. When, for instance, Comrade Ercole of the official majority of the Italian party approaches the issue of factory nuclei with the argument that, thanks to nuclei, the connection between the party and mass is achieved, that they represent the most important terrain for party activity, and that they even absorb the whole character of our work, I am of the opinion that we are facing a very serious deviation. In the Italian discussion, we have tried to characterize, with a complete and deep analysis, many deviations of the group to which Comrade Ercole belongs. If we believe that all party work consists in establishing a tie with the masses, after which the rest comes automatically, then we have arrived at out Menchevism. The tie with the masses is necessary, but part of the problem lies in the possibility for the masses to find in our party a center around which to rally, a center that is able to lead them towards the final revolutionary objectives. We have examples of parties that, in spite of having the masses with them, not really being revolutionary parties that have led these masses to defeat. Let's get this bit. Okay, the party must not only have a tie with the masses, but also have a center for those masses to rally around, which can lead them to the final revolutionary objective, that is to say, they need to act as general staff. Back to the text. It can't be denied that situations exist in which the masses are motivated to act according to non-communist politics. In this case, the theory of Ercole is absolutely opportunist. If in the place of aiming at the conquest of masses, we start from the conquest of the masses as the supreme principle, we are facing the purest Menchevism. The matter is not to establish whether or not the nuclei give us a large connection with the masses, on an issue on which there's still plenty to discuss. The problem to solve is if this connection is of a revolutionary nature. If any organic connection with the masses must be in itself revolutionary, this only proves the rightness of our statement that the organization based on factory nuclei leads to workerism and laborism. To establish an automatic relationship between the social basis, in the strictest sense of the term, and the political character of the party is tantamount to saying that any party that organizes the working class must be, by virtue of it, a revolutionary party, which belongs to the very nature of Menchevism. Although I won't go any deeper into this problem, I maintain that, therefore, we are not those who have abandoned the terrain of the theory of Marx and Lenin. Comrade Bukharin has criticized my speech in a very warm and friendly way. There's no need to say here that Comrade Bukharin is a good polemist, but at this time he behaved in his usual way. That is, he passed my statements off in his own way, and in the sense of legend, long widespread, of Bordiga's theories. I do not pretend to be handsome, but the portrait Bukharin made of me is horrible. He ascribes to me certain formulations, attacks them, and crumbles them. In his speech, he tells us that the internal regime of the International must be changed, but the ways he has in polemizing authorize us to be extremely pessimist as to the perspectives of the recovery of our internal regime. Bukharin, he is here making agitation. Therefore, agitation is not only made among workers and the party, it is even made at the plenum of the enlarged executive. Allow me to say that maybe it's far easier to make agitation among you than among workers. That essentially, he's saying that Bukharin has made a straw man of him. Comrade Bukharin simplifies ideas. To be able to simplify positions and to present them in a few words is certainly a great merit, but even more difficult is to carry out the simplification without confining oneself to mere agitation, and participating to the really serious work, to the common work, to which we all must give a contribution according to our energies. To simplify without agitation, demagogy. Here is a great revolutionary problem. This kind of maestros of simplification is quite rare. Is it though? I think that what I'm doing is simplification, certainly. I hope that I'm not losing out on anything. Uh, but I don't think it's particularly rare. Anyway, continuing. Undoubtedly, Bukharin has exceptional qualities of which you should make use of to operate in this sense within the international. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that after the speeches of several great leaders of the Russian Revolution, we are not going to listen sufficiently often to expositions that perform the great duty of simplifying without demagogy. A few words on some objections of Comrade Bukharin. He puts forward the following argument. Bordiga's contradictions originate from the idea that the revolution is not a matter of organizational forms. Nevertheless, he eventually dealt with Bolshevization uniquely from the point of view of organization, suggesting as a solution that the whole problem a change of a purely organizational nature, that is, the reversal of the famous pyramid. But all this is not true. First of all, I spoke of Bolshevization from several viewpoints. I criticize it from the theoretical, historical, and tactical points of view. This proves I do not consider the Bolshevization activity as a mere organizational problem. I rather consider it a political problem of the International's activity and tactics. Okay, that doesn't make it not organizational. Your political structure is a your 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 organizational structure is a political problem. This isn't a defense. Anyway, besides, you must admit that our opposition was on tactical problems, and above all, for these problems that we suggest solutions, which are different from those accepted in the World Congresses. It is absolutely clear that to solve a problem, a simple organizational change is not enough. We therefore expect that, through tactics and actions, we demonstrate that we really possess a sound revolutionary direction. Another argument of Comrade Bukharin. Bordiga is against the mechanical transfer of Russian experiences to other countries. But having forgotten the specific character of the situation in the various countries of Western Europe, he is himself guilty of a mechanical transposition. Apparently, my thesis is quite different. I said any Russian experience is in general useful, and we must not and cannot forget it, but that is not enough. Consequently, I don't reject the utilization of the Russian experience. I maintain, however, that the experience of the Russian party cannot contain the entire solution of the problem of revolutionary tactics, which is a peculiar character of revolutionary strategy in the West that I have supposed to have forgotten. Comrade Bukharin says that in my speech, the existence of large social democratic parties and trade unions is not mentioned, which is precisely the difference on which I insisted. To illustrate the differences as regards the relationships with the state apparatus in the Russian Revolution and in the West, I said that in the Western countries there has been for a long time a very stable bourgeois democratic state apparatus, playing a role that the history of the Russian movement does not know. Such a role may determine the possibility of a mobilization of the proletariat by the bourgeoisie in the opportunist sense, through the trade unions and the social democratic parties. My analysis makes reference to this essential aspect of the situation in the West, the possibility to ideologically mobilize the working class is far greater in countries with liberal traditions than it was in Russia, and this explains the development of the social democratic organizations in the West. Comrade Bukharin cannot therefore say that I contradict myself, that I am guilty of a mechanical transposition. Sure enough, I do not agree with him when he says that. According to the Russian experience, it is precisely the tactic of the United Front, the one that should be transplanted on a larger scale in the West. I believe that on this issue, the Russian comrades are making a mistake. certain maneuvers which could be successful in dealing with the Menshevik and social revolutionary parties, which are not so tightly connected to the state apparatus, cannot be harmlessly transferred to the Western countries. If we insist in doing so, we will find an obstacle in the possibility for the bourgeoisie to mobilize the proletariat, and will be bitterly disappointed. I'm not going to go any deeper in this analysis, also because I've already dealt with the first within my first speech. I only note that the contradictions Comrade Bukharin has denounced do not exist. To solve our tactical problems, we need much more than Bolshevization. We need much more than the conviction that it's sufficient to study the history of the Bolshevik Party to find solution to all problems. We need additional experiences, and such experiences the International must draw them from the world workers and communist movement. Another objection. When I spoke of the differences as a question of the nuclei in Russia and in the West, I am alleged to say, according to Bukharin, the question of the state. That is the central political problem, which in Russia was set by history, would not be posed by history in the West. Comrade Bukharin therefore maintains I have a pessimistic perspective of the social democratic type. What I actually stated is that the communist workers, when they confine their activity to the frame of the factory nucleus, run the risk of forgetting the central problem of the conquest of power. I believe that this problem is posed by history also in the West, but our role of communist parties consists precisely in giving the proletariat the means to resolve this problem in a unitary sense. The party must avoid to make maneuvers that save the bourgeoisie. It must avoid relapsing into that laborism, which has already helped several times the bourgeoisie to stay in power. The problem has already been posed, but we have not been able to exploit its elements. It is not sufficient, then, that the problem is set by history. Also, this objection is therefore unjustified. So, to note, nothing that has been said here actually responds to anything I've said. In the sense that Bordiga is like, yeah, the organizational form. Yeah, I'm going to leave beside the other stuff. I agree that the conditions in the West were different. I agree that, for example, the Bolshevization strategy just isn't really going to work, and that you can't just mechanically move things over, and so on and so forth. But I will say that Bordiga certainly is not arguing with the conception that organizational structure is important. Um, he's certainly saying that is of lesser importance and is being pushed forward, but he is not denying that as a certain factor within within revolutionary action of the party. You cannot simply ignore it. You can't say that there's no lessons to be learned from other um, historical movements, which he also states that there's lessons to be learned that we need to learn from the experiences of the Russian Revolution. Um, and he's saying that we need to learn from all these different movements for the world revolution, right? So I don't see anything that supports this conception that the organizational form shouldn't be anticipated, that you can't say anything about it until after you have done your own personal experiences, that you can't do any anticipation of structure until after you've already done it. That quite the opposite. So I don't understand where this reading that a couple of people that I've been in contact with about this have of it. None of it carries through. Oh, oopsies. Uh, hold on. I've completely lost it. Um, I will take this. I'm just going to say proves my opposition. Okay. Okay. Here we are. Continuing. Let's move to the Italian question. As concerns the critique I made of the tactics vis-a-vis the anti-fascists and the proposals of anti-parliament, Comrade Ercole said that this critique is wrong, as I don't take into account the analysis of the situation, while the central of the Italian party is fortunately relying on an exact analysis of the new situation. Now I am stating that the analysis was false. We have in our hands a document on which, during the preparation for the Congress, has been discussed a lot. A report of Comrade Gramsci to the Central, written in September 1924. Matteotti had been killed in June. This report contains a completely wrong perspective. It asserts fascism has already been beaten by the bourgeois opposition, and that the monarchy itself would be about to liquidate fascism on a parliamentary terrain. Interruption by Ercole. We only foresaw a compromise between fascism and Aventino, which actually took place. Vortiga continues. You foresaw Mussolini's dismissal. The force relation between fascism and opposition has been evaluated in a completely erroneous way, and also the analysis of the situation was consequently completely erroneous. Therefore, there is really an error in the perspective and an error in the party maneuver. The formula was used. The situation is democratic. A really astonishing study of the situation. If the situation is reactionary, for the Communist Party, there's nothing to do. If the situation is democratic, there's work for the petty bourgeois parties. In this way, our party, the Communist Party, completely vanishes from the stage. Another argument of Ercole. The maneuver was good because it obtained successes. In the first place, the criticisms of comrades of the left made to the tactics of anti-parliamentarism was, to a certain extent, considered correct by the comrades of the center themselves. It is said, for instance, that the decision to get back to the parliament should have taken long before, and not after the parliament holidays. We say more than that. From the very beginning, we should not have tailed behind the bourgeois opposition and participated to its meetings, nor leave together with it the House. The comrades of the center say we did well because we obtained successes, because the party influence grew. But the situation is as follows: complete collapse of the bourgeois and semi-bourgeois anti-fascist opposition. In such a situation, the Communist Party should have gained a decisive influence, above all within the working class and the peasantry. It should, with its tactical line, have proved to be up to the role of the third independent factor of the political struggle. But the development of events is not exploited in this matter. The success Ercole talks about consisted in the increase of the membership. But the two issues cannot be tightly connected. Presently, our membership is decreasing, but the Central maintains as a numerical loss accompanied by an increase of influence. I was speaking of the party as a political factor of the situation. I'd like to be able to be optimist, but everything is proving that we did not obtain anything, and that we did not exploit a situation that was very favorable to us. And now, the last issue I wanted to talk about. That is the party's internal situation. We are accused to be a fractionist organization, and on this campaign was constructed the whole building of the Congress preparation. I'm here asserting that the left fraction has, since the beginning of the Italian Congress, made a statement in which it questioned the validity of the Congress and requested the judgment of the International. I am not trying to evoke here certain polemics, but I am formally asking that organs of the International examine given questions, such as, for instance, the incredible accusations Comrade Ercole made from this tribune against the comrades of the left. We never solicited party officials to lead the party and to assume positions in the Comitato di Intesa. We never did it because it would have been a gross mistake. The document on which this accusation is grounded still has to be presented. There's only the letter of the comrade who is supposed to have received such a request. It is maintained that this letter exists, in which he was invited to act in that sense. But this letter has never been exhibited. They assert today that this letter exists somewhere, but Due to the gravity of the accusation, we have the right to require that it is grounded on evidence, and we will be able to prove that such charge is completely false. But let's forget about all that. The activity of the left has been discussed. It has been said, for instance, that we have been truly beaten in the strongest federations, that the party got weakened in the federations in which we have influence. The very opposite is true. The federations Ercole talks about, Milano, Torino, and Napoli, are exactly those in which the left is strongest. As concerns the way the Congress was prepared, it must be said that a system of party consultation has been discovered according to which even I, Bordiga, as a member of the party organization, have voted for the theses of the Central. How was it possible? We will discuss this another time, but it's enough to give an idea of the value of the figures provided by the Congress. Of all this, though, we don't worry too much. I only wanted to tell the comrades that in our polemics within the Congress, we criticize ordinativism, the ideological and political position of our Central. Finally, with regard to the fact that we are forced to be part of the Central, we have made a very accurate statement. Comrades, I am getting to the conclusion. As far as the internal regime and the reversal of the pyramid are concerned, I cannot here reply to what Comrade Bukharin has said on this issue and on fractions. But I'm asking, will change in the future take place as our internal relations? Does this plenary meeting demonstrate that a new way will be followed? I'll assert here that the regime of internal terror must cease. The statement of the French and Italian delegates raised for us some doubts. Although the theses speak of the realization of a new lifestyle within the party, we are waiting to see you at work. I believe that the hunt to the so-called fractionism will continue and will give the same results we've had so far. We see it also in the way that it is attempted to solve the German issues and several other problems. I must say that this method of personal humiliation is a deplorable method, even when adopted towards political elements who deserve to be bitterly fought. I don't think it is a revolutionary method. I think that the majority, who is today given proof of its orthodoxy by having fun at the expense of the persecuted sinners, is most likely made of humiliated ex-opponents. We know that such methods have been used and probably will be employed again, with comrades who not only have a revolutionary tradition, but who are still precious elements for our future struggles. This mania of self-demolition must end if we really intend to qualify for the direction of the revolutionary struggle of the proletariat. The sight of this plenary session justifies gloomy perspectives as the change is about to occur within the International. I will therefore vote against the project for a resolution that has been presented. That was in German Protocol, pages 283 to 289. So I just did a quick summary of that previous thing. So Borga's position on organizational is for as such. The organizational structure is considered a political problem of activity and tactics. Organizational structure changes alone do not solve all problems. Nobody would ever make such a claim, and if they did, then methinks that while Bordiga is claiming Bukharin is strawmanning him, I think that he's strawmanning Bukharin. Anyway, it is through action and tactics that revolutionary direction is decided. Ergo, organizational structure is power tactics and decides activities. It is one tool of many that determines if a party is revolution. Ergo, organizational structure is important. It decides as part of the list of things that decides this if the party is revolutionary. And we can say things about prior to carrying it out through analysis of conditions as the basis of carrying out our work. So anybody who's just saying, "Oh, don't think about organizational structure, just think about tactics," is out of their goddamn mind, and they're gonna fuck up organization. Anyway, continuing. 14th session, March 4th, 1926. Discussion on Losowski report on the trade union issue. Bordiga. Comrades, I would like today to deal with two issues: international trade union unity and trade union tactics in Italy. When at the Fifth Congress a new proposal was made for our trade union strategy, i.e., the Proposal for World Trade Union Unity, I opposed it, although not as resolutely as today. The reason is, at, the, at that time, the issue had just been outlined, and the various delegations did not have the time to develop it on a serious discussion. I asserted at the time that the Communist International had often changed the general solutions to problems of the relationship between economic movement and political movement on an international scale. At the time of the Second Congress, Profintern did not exist yet, and we decided to give certain left oriented trade union organizations, which were on the way to gain closer to us, the possibility of being represented at the Congress by a delegation. At that time, I was against the admission of trade union organizations to a World Congress of Political Parties. At the Third Congress of the Communist International, another solution of the problem was reached. That is, it was decided to found the Red International of Trade Unions as an antithesis to the Amsterdam Trade Union International, for the reasons you are well aware of. At the Fifth Congress, there is another change of mind, and now there is a proposal not to give up the Red International of Trade Unions and to merge it with the International of Amsterdam. It is obvious today that this is not just a watchword to conquer the masses and to organize them within the RITU. It is clear that the objective is not just an agitational maneuver, it is something more. The objective is to create a unitary trade union international as a definitive solution of the problems of the relations between trade union movement and political movement of the world proletariat. It is true, it is asserted that a long period of preparation will be necessary, that unity can be achieved only in given conditions, that certain guarantees must be obtained before undertaking the unification work. But in reality, the objective is a new system. There will be a Communist International, and there will be a Unitary Trade Union International, within which we'll have a fraction, directed by the Political International, to be able one day to seize the leadership of the Unitary Trade Union International. According to arguments that appear of an extreme simplicity, this solution seems to be most logical. Since we have in each country a unitary trade union central, since we are against trade unions, the schisms. I'm not going to read that word. Schisms. Even if the central of a given country is in the hand of the yellows, why should not the solution of the problem of unity be one of the best also on a world scale? I believe that it is not difficult to answer this question. In what does the difference lie between our tactic in the national field and the tactic in the international field? In a very simple fact, if we work for a trade union unity on a national scale, and if we obtain this unity, it is done because it allows us to penetrate into unions, to sell into them, and to bring large masses under our influence. This in view of conquering one day the leadership of organisms like the Union, which in the struggle for power are an extremely important factor for success. The thing has, under all points of view, an enormous importance, because in this way we will take root in these organizations which are destined to play an important role both in the struggle for power and after. Our insertion within the unions as fractions will necessarily lead us, in the period of final struggle, to take in our hands the central trade union apparatus. When masses will be in motion, and if the struggle will have favorable development, we will be able, with a Congress or with other means, including a coup de main, to conquer the whole trade union apparatus. Then reformers will have no other means of defense but the solidarity of the bourgeois state. When we're dealing with the international movement, however, the issue assumes a quite different aspect, because on an international scale, the struggle for the conquest of power, the conquest of power itself, take on completely different forms. We can't certainly believe that we will enter the arena for the definitive conquest of power at the same time in all countries. The proletariat can only seize the power in stages, one country after another. The international trade union central apparatus will not therefore fall in our hands all at once. The Social Democrats will save it by moving it, as the revolution progresses, in countries that are as far as possible from the country of the victorious proletarian revolution. We're going to take this. And this is the difference between international and national work, or tactics rather. All right. So national work with industrial unions involves penetrating into the unions, bring large masses under the influence of the Communist Party via that. And it has the aim of conquering leadership in the union so that at the final struggle, we can take the central trade union apparatus and alongside the masses conquer and enter the central trade union apparatus. Doing so will force all reforms out of the union movement into the hands of the bourgeois state, and then, from there we should be in good position to mop up. However, if we have one international reformist central trade union in apparatus, then what's going to happen is that the reformists will simply move the center time after time. And the question is like, well, okay, why don't you just have the central trade union apparatus within, for example, the Soviet Union? Um, I mean, I guess that's what the RITU was. And then the Amsterdam one was in Germany, right? Amsterdam? I don't know. I'm American. I don't know these things. Anyway, um, continuing. That's why we must continually repeat that to workers that Amsterdam's Trade Union International is not a mass proletarian organization, but rather an organ of the bourgeoisie. An organ that keeps the closest ties with the Bureau International du Travail and with the Society of Nations, an organization that cannot be conquered by a proletariat and its revolutionary party. I therefore believe that the old watchword, Moscow against Amsterdam, has been for the conquest of the masses far better and more useful. But this subject may appear too abstract. I'll move on topics that refer to the present situation. Which are the most important events of the trade union movement? Which are in general our perspectives in this field? From the report of Comrade Losowski, it results that we are convinced that the development of the capitalist crisis is created today from a situation very favorable to us. Why then, in this very moment, are we willing to change tactics? A change that corresponds to a pessimist perspective, to the pessimist sum total of our autonomous trade union movement. Another event is the movement in the Orient. The speaker has underlined the great importance of the trade union movement in China, which already involves 1 million of organized or workers. Such a formation of movement characterized by a clear and marked class character in the colonial countries and among the oppressed peoples has an enormous importance. It represents a fundamental background for our tactic of the colonial and national question. In this way, we can be sure to be able to win to the RITU the overwhelming majority of the trade union movement in the colonial and oriental countries. This is another argument that should convince us to let the RITU central at the side of the Communist International and renounce or liquidate it. The last event is the influence of America, which grows day by day, both as concerns the resistance of capitalism to the revolutionary forces and with reference to the penetration of bourgeois influences into workers' masses and development of class collaboration. I believe this confirms what I just said. The more the influence of American capital in Europe grows, the more will also grow, as Osowski said, the influence of American trade unions within Amsterdam's International. The center of gravity will increasingly shift towards American trade unions, and this confirms my argument that the International Yellow Trade Union Central will move into country where reaction and opportunism are the strongest. Therefore, if we don't have a pessimist perspective, we shouldn't permit the unification with Amsterdam's International. Quite the opposite. The RITU must stay intact. And though it must not rule out vast actions in order to widen our influence among the masses, we can and we should make the Amsterdam International's proposal for a united front. The Anglo-Russian Committee must continue the activity as started, and precisely in the form of a committee for the united front of Russian and English trade unions, trying to add to this committee also trade unions of other countries. This is extremely important as a means of propaganda and agitation. and in this way must very satisfactory results can be obtained. On the other hand, however, it is necessary to give a clear perspective to the development of the struggle. For our tactics in England is of decisive importance that not all our attention, and that of the proletariat, is absorbed only by the left trade union movement. We must never forget the Communist Party, even if it is a small party. We must stress that in the development of the social crisis in England and in the struggle, it will necessarily be the leader of proletarians and the general staff of the revolution. Quick thing there. The Communist Party cannot be subsumed by the trade unionist movement, as only the party can act as the leader of all proletarians and act as the general staff of the revolution. Back to the text. I would like now to say a few words on the trade union activity of our party, on which has been discussed at length at our third Congress. The situation in which is today the Italian trade union movement is well known to all. The fascist reaction has destroyed the old apparatus of class trade unions, and is now trying to create a network of fascist trade unions. Fascism has made two attempts to solve the problem. The first method they used was a voluntary enrollment in fascist trade unions, opposed to non-fascist unions. Of course, fascist unions were openly supported by the state, while non-fascist unions had to endure the harsh abuse of reaction. Nevertheless, fascism had to acknowledge that its plans are failing. It was not able to influence the working masses as it has been able to do with the peasant masses, as the latter had been directly subjected to fascist terror. Factory proletariat is too concentrated to allow to be oppressed and subjugated as had been the case with the rural population. At the elections for internal commissions, for instance, in spite of all difficulties and reprisals, it was almost always the class list to be voted on and to win. Fascism realized that and to put a remedy to it completely changed its trade union policy. Thanks to a special law, fascist trade unions have become the only unions recognized by the state. All worker activities have been forbidden by law, and an out-and-out fascist monopoly of trade unions have been created, by which the fascist unions have made a pact with the bosses' organizations. According to the new law, only fascist trade unions have a right to negotiate with employers. Hence, for the free trade unions, which are in theory admitted by the state, it is absolutely impossible, apart from all other difficulties, to carry out any work. In this second period, our trade union tactics should have been completely different. The former situation offered to us the possibility, on the occasion of the election for internal commissions, to wage a struggle against fascist unions in the name of class unions. This was a permanent achievement of the United Front, and in the firms where both fascists and classists were represented, the majority of workers, in spite of the fascist regime, voted for the class unions. According to the new provisions of the law, the internal commissions have been disbanded, and in the factories no legal activity is now present. It's true that the right to existence for free trade unions is proclaimed, but such acknowledgement is purely theoretical. In practice, their offices, their libraries, etc., are under distraint. Our activity has therefore to be concentrated in the workplace, where we still have the possibility to maintain a contact with the working masses. For the new tactic to be adopted, two proposals existed, on which it has been discussed at length in our Congress. The number of union members decreases day by day. The majority of workers are unorganized, but our aim must be to set in motion the whole working class. This must take place in the name of the trade unions, and our point of view is that in this work we must not renounce the flag of the free unions, of the Confederation General de Lavoro. It is necessary that we work under the banner of these organizations, which so many times have led the Italian workers to struggle. It is true that these organizations carry out almost no activity at present. It is true that what is left of them is in the hands of reformists, who are always at the ready for a compromise with fascists, a compromise that has not yet occurred yet for the sole reason that fascism does not consider it of any value. But nevertheless, we must bear in mind that when the proletariat will resume its struggle, when the working class will be able to breathe a bit more freely, we will have to lead the struggle under the standard of free unions, whatever the causes and conditions of the battle. If we leave the banner to the reformists, they will be able, as soon as the pressure is reduced, to rise again and recover space among the working masses. They will reopen the legal seats of their organizations and will isolate us from the masses. This is a thesis of the left of our party as regards the work that must today be carried out on the Union terrain. We have proposed to establish in each firm union sections. The trade unions must not die, they must resist against the difficult situation in which they've been put because, sooner or later, they will be again able to play their own role. We should, therefore, in our opinion, create in every factory secret committees in charge of workers' organization. These factory sections must be directly connected to unions, even if these are led by reformists. If eventually we will have the possibility to breathe more freely, the skeleton of a mass organization will be already available, and we will exert on a greater influence than the Social Democrats. The committees within the factory should also work with the unorganized masses. They should, at every conflict between workers and bosses, create provisional agitation committees that will include the whole factory's workforce. This is our proposal. I'll add that, but I'm not going to summarize it for now. But our central has designed another solution. It is very difficult to clearly define this solution, as the thesis of the central was not clearly expressed in our pre-Congress debate. It was eventually modified after resistance encountered at the Congress and found a very ambiguous formulation in the report of Comrade Ercole and in the theses. At any rate, the whole theoretical line of our central shows that it has on these issues a conception that, in our opinion, is neither Marxist nor Leninist. For the central, although it is not clearly stated, a new organization should be created, a new network of factory organs that should substitute the old trade unions destroyed by fascism and the still existing trade unions. We're going to add this as well. The point of view the Central has class of the lively opposition in the Congress, and we believe that the representatives of the International at the Congress rather share our position. The trade union tactics of our Central evoke the danger of a split. And what do these tactics consist? In the creation of agitation committees for trade union unity as permanent organs with their own network. At first, only agitation committees had been mentioned. Then, due to harsh criticisms, moved to this watchword for trade union unity was added. If we aim at creating a network of permanent organs, which comprises both union organized and unorganized workers, an organization with local and provincial committees, congresses, etc., then we give reformists a good pretext to exclude communists from the Confederation General de Livorno. We are therefore threatened by the danger of being out of important organizations in a moment when a more favorable situation is in view, and having in their place an organization of our own, a new organization founded by our party and compromising only a minority of workers. It is not just a matter of two diverging watchwords, but rather of a vital issue for the work of the Communist Party of Italy. And on this, we want to draw the attention of the Communist International. 16th section, March 8th, 1926. After Zinnovie's conclusions, speaks Bordiga to give a brief statement. Due to reasons I have explained in my two speeches given during the general discussion, I am voting against the proposed resolution. It contains a mention of a necessary modification of the internal regime of the International, but as the proceedings of the plenum represent neither the expression of a new method nor the opening of new ways in the life of the Comintern, I am forced, also on this occasion, to maintain my oppositional point of view. I express at the same time the wish that facts will be able to demonstrate a serious improvement. I neither present here theses nor a resolution, but I make reference to both the theses presented at the Fifth Congress and to those that the left of the Communist Party of Italy submitted to the last Congress of the party. I'm asking the executive to make known to the Sixth Congress the general part of such theses. Next up, 19th session, March 14th, 1926, another short statement. Bordiga, after a report of Bukharin on behalf of the German Commission, in which mentions is also made of the critique moved by the Italian left to the methods of the International. Since Comrade Bukharin has been so kind as to expound once more in this session the critiques I made in the Commission, I am forced to further clarify the 2 points I had formally developed within the Commission. I complained against the method of internal struggle utilized in the resolution, in which consists in extracting separate quotations from statements of comrades out of their logical context to demonstrate with them the same comrades' deviations. I believe that this method of struggle is not favorable to an ideological clarification within the masses. In addition, in the commission I decidedly oppose the exaggerated use of ideological terror. That is, against the fact that whenever we contact simple party members before informing them of given political issues, they are told that they take a position against the political content of such issues the way is presented by the Central Committee and by the executive, and they are to be considered as enemies of the executive, as enemies of communism, etc. It is not sufficient to declare that a distinction is made between left-wing leaders and left-wing workers. This method of ideological terror must be given up, and start making clear for the workers the political content of the questions. I did not request an exhaustive study be started of the works of the left comrades, but I would like to warn the executive that the comrades here present against neglecting the connection with the masses. True, I have been accused of having often neglected or underestimated the tie with the masses, but I nevertheless desire to draw the attention of the comrades to the need of not losing this connection. I actually do want to take this a little bit. All right. So this is the 20th session, March 15th, 1926, a second statement. During the discussion on the report of the German Commission, after the speech of Ercole, the representative of the Italian left makes a second statement. The discussion on the report of the German Commission has reached a point where I find myself compelled to make a second statement, a very clear statement, especially as Comrade Ercole has said that the tone of Bordiga's statements have become increasingly more aggressive. I first of all declare that, in my opinion, a right danger actually exists. Comrade Ercole states that in the course of political discussions an exact analysis was made, and that it could be established that the right danger resides in France. I wonder if an analysis which claims to be able to give us even the address of the right danger can be considered a serious application of the Marxist method. It is alleged to have fixed its domicile at 96 Quai des Gempars, or at 123 Rue Montmartre. That is the office of the Revolution Proletarienne or the Bulletin Communiste. Italian. Maybe it will be added that the right danger receives from 6 to 8 p.m. The analysis should be approached in quite a different matter. The right danger is present. It exists not only in the resolutions written on paper, but first of all in the facts and the political attitude of the Comintern, as I explained in my speech on the political question. This danger is also contained in the resolution so far formulated, both on the general political question and on the issues dealt with reference to individual parties, namely, the German party and the French party. This danger is also expressed by the fact that here, before the forum of the enlarged executive, the Russian problem has not been subjected to discussion. In my speech, I have already mentioned the fact that the sections of the Comintern, as they are today, do not have any possibility to deal with the Russian question, and that in that I found a confirmation of my critique. It is absolutely necessary that the International deals with the central problem of relations between the revolutionary struggle of the world proletariat and the policy of the proletarian state and the Communist Party in Russia. It is necessary that the International acquires the capacity to discuss these problems. It is advisable that against the right danger is erected a left resistance. I am not saying a fraction, rather a left resistance on an international scale. But I must quite frankly say that this is sound, useful, and necessary resistance cannot and must not take the shape of a maneuver or of a plot. I agree with Comrade Eric Coley when he defines absurd the behavior of comrades who in the political discussion have fully approved the report and the theses and now, in the last moment, make opposition, not against the international right deviation, but against the resolution on the German questions. These comrades who are not able to raise any objection to the general political line pass several times the opposition because, as groups, as chiefs or ex chiefs, are not satisfied with the resolutions concerning their party or their country. For this reason, I cannot declare myself in agreement with these comrades, with this self styled ultra left opposition. I'm not certainly saying this to conquer the sympathy of the majority, to which I attribute the responsibility precisely to the system. All the more so as today's opponents have been formally supported by this very majority, which considered them to be the best possible leaders. No, that's not necessary. I conclude, as far as the German question is concerned, I'm of the opinion that we should warn the good left revolutionary German workers that they should be on their guard against two false lines. On the one hand, the defeatism and mistrust towards the international and the Russian Revolution, which are hidden under unanimously accepted resolutions. On the other, the blind optimism, which wants to avoid any discussion and any contrast, which does not want a real exploitment of the experiences and collaboration within the communist vanguard of the proletariat, but rather pays homage to religious and dogmatic points of view. I explained why this latter attitude is equally dangerous as the former for the relations between the world proletariat and the Russian Revolution. The Russian Party and the Soviet Russia had the largest revolutionary experience. They alone, fighting, have conquered the revolutionary victory. But also, the revolutionary workers of Germany have their own experience. They also have to rely on the teachings their struggles and their defeats have produced. We must allow their tradition and their class instincts to be consulted with reference to the right dangers by which they have been harshly hit in the course of the very last battles. This workers' vanguard must make a clear position both on party tactic, as is expressed today, through its more than doubtful maneuvers against social democracy and the famous campaign for the plebiscitum, and on the general line of the Comintern and on the problems of the Russian party's policy, which is at the center of the politics of the world revolution. Since the Russian Revolution is the first great stage of the world revolution, it is also our duty. Its problems are our problems, and every militant in the Revolutionary International has not only the right, but also the duty to collaborate in their solution. And then finally, we've got the motion. In the same session, after the vote on this resolution on the German question, unanimous with the only exception of the contrary votes of Hansen and Bordiga, the latter eventually will also vote against the resolution on the American question. The President Geschke reads the following Bordiga motion. I want to formulate in writing my position with reference to the Russian problems. I have the right to ascertain that the plenum hasn't discussed the Russian question, that neither has the possibility nor the preparation to do so, and that this fact gives me the right to draw the conclusion that we are facing one of the results of the International's wrong general policy from the right deviations of this policy. I had made the same observation in my first speech in the course of the general discussion. In the concrete, I suggest the World Congress be convoked for the next summer, having on the agenda precisely the question of relations between the revolutionary struggle of the world proletariat and the politics of the Russian state, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, holding well that the discussion of these problems must be adequately prepared in all the sections of the International. The motion is transmitted by unanimous vote to the Presidium of the International. And that's the text. That was an interesting one. We got a lot of stuff. I'm more solid in my position here, and I find it very silly that people are disagreeing with it on the basis of things which are echoed by me. It's just that they're using different words here. They're basically saying that organizational structure is tactics. I find this to be a ridiculously broad definition of tactics, but sure, whatever. I'm not going to argue that. I don't find it particularly important to do so. Um, but then what's kind of happening here is there's a denial of the mutual relation and interdependence of tactics, that is, activities one can carry out, and organizational structure, and vice versa. The tactics that you want to carry out are going to, in many ways, determine organizational structure, because organizational structure, in many ways, determines what kind of tactics you can carry out. A a military a military organization can carry out fundamentally different tactics than a non-military organization, just by the fact that they're organized on different lines structurally, um, and all of that. So what you want to do, what you want to carry out, is going to determine in many ways what kind of organizational structure you have. But after that, you know, your organizational structure is of the utmost importance, because that's going to determine whether or not you can carry out those tactics you want to carry out. In addition, you can make claims beforehand about what kind of organizational structure you want to have. If you know that you're going to be a revolutionary party, you know you can't organize on lines of, for example, constant convocations, like the DSA style thing. It just doesn't work. You lack the ability to be the kind of dynamism that's necessary for this, right? That should be pretty obvious to anybody. However, nobody is going to say that organizational structure is going to do everything, which is what it, I've been accused of before. I'm not saying organizational structure will do everything, quite the opposite. I'm saying that the organizational structure makes it possible to do everything. And that's where the difference lies. And that's where I'm going to leave it off for today. Thanks for everybody who attended this session reading about the Third Communist International Sixth Enlarged Executive Report by Left of the Communist Party of Italy. Next up will be the 1945, skipping quite ahead, Nature, Functions, and Tactics of the Revolutionary Party of the Working Class. We are kind of getting through these, which is nice. So we'll have to go back because we still need to read through Lenin's What Is to Be Done and Rosa Luxemburg's The Mass Strike down here. And have a great day. UMP signing off.